Halo is one of the most famous franchises in all of gaming, and the Master Chief has become a household name. The Bungie era is considered the golden age, during which the original studio helmed the franchise. After their final game, Halo Reach, the franchise transferred to a studio purpose-built to continue running with Halo's baton, 343 Industries. Microsoft intended on this studio bringing Halo into the future, as Bungie separated and did its own thing. The future didn't develop as anyone hoped. The 343 era of Halo has been characterized by repeated cycles of excitement, then disappointment, then excitement for the next installment. The excitement, though, diminishes with each title, as the disappointment instills itself deeper and deeper into the player base. The upcoming remake of Combat Evolved has been met with an excitement that can only be described as tepid. Faith in the studio has cratered. In fact, it rebranded to Halo Studios, presumably as a move to sidestep their bad reputation, a move that I haven't seen from any other game developer. The upcoming remake will be the first game in the self-proclaimed Halo Studios era, and will it fare any better? Time will tell. However, we're not here to talk about the upcoming remake. Instead, I want to look back on the 343 era of Halo. In particular, I want to dive into their three main installments, Halo 4, 5, and Infinite. As the studio's reputation has tarnished, so has the opinion on each of their games. In this video, I want to focus on the games themselves. For how malign this 343 era is, I think there are glimmers of potential, and even greatness, throughout their campaigns. In short, I guess, I just want to give them a balanced look, and appreciate the good as well as the bad. As we take a deep dive into each campaign, you may come to see that there are some parts of the game you haven't noticed or appreciated. As we go on though, I think you'll start to notice a pattern. There's real talent behind these games, but they're plagued by a single core issue. Because that issue is so vital, nothing can stand strong without it. With all that said, let's dive into 343's first full-fledged title, Halo 4. Halo 4's campaign is the most divisive in the series. It ranks near the top for many people, but it also ranks as many others' least favorites. There aren't really any other Halo campaigns that have such a range. Over the years though, Halo 4's reputation has steadily tilted towards the more negative side. The game hasn't aged the best, you could say. However, I don't think this is primarily the game's fault. Halo 4 is the first game developed by 343 Industries. Bungie passed on the creative torch to them, and while their creative direction has been anything but positively received. You can draw a line between the decline of Halo 4's reputation and the decline of 343's. And it makes sense why. Because that journey went in a direction that made the majority of fans unhappy, it makes sense that they'll look back on the first step of that journey more negatively. But this retrospective isn't about the studio, it's about the game. I want to look at Halo 4 and its merits by themselves. So I've talked about what Halo 4 means to other people, but what does it mean to me? Well, it's just as complicated. I identify with both the love and the hate sides of Halo 4. It's a flawed game, there's no doubt about that. There are issues with the lore, the world building, the art design, the gameplay changes, and so on. There are significant drawbacks, and we'll get to them. Yet at the same time, Halo 4 is a game with an unmistakable heart. It's a game that tells a human story about a man who the world sees as no more than a machine, about a woman who grapples with her own mortality, about a man and a woman who, at the end of the day, just don't want to be alone. There are parts of this story that resonate deeply with me, and in certain ways is a perfect continuation from Halo 3. At the end of the day, Halo 4 tries to differentiate itself from its predecessors, for better or worse, and to me, Halo 4 represents the best and worst of the series all at the same time. So let's dive into Halo 4 from the beginning. Before we really get into the beginning, we have to start with an ending. Specifically, the ending of the original Halo trilogy. Halo 4 is a direct sequel to Halo 3, so the ending events of that game laid the groundwork for Halo 4. With that in mind, I'm going to give a very basic overview of the Halo trilogy story. Humanity is at war with the Covenant, an alien alliance that worships ancient beings known as the Forerunners. They believe that activating the Halos, ancient Forerunner structures, will lead to their salvation. However, the Master Chief discovers an equally ancient threat on a Halo ring, the Flood. An overwhelming force so vast that the Forerunners destroyed themselves to stop its spread. The trilogy's story can be boiled down to humanity's conflict with both the Covenant and the Flood. In Halo 2, the Covenant has a split. The prophets betray the elites, also known as the Sangheili, in favor of the brutes, and this results in a civil war. The elites end up teaming up with humanity in the fight against the Covenant and the Flood's controlling force known as the Gravemind. Halo 3 ends with humanity triumphant. The Flood, as well as the Covenant, have been defeated. The war is finally over. However, Master Chief and Cortana are left adrift in space. He goes into cryosleep, telling Cortana to wake him when she needs him. She ends by saying she'll miss him. This is where Halo 4 takes the baton, so to speak. This story opens with Dr. Catherine Halsey being interrogated. She was the head researcher behind the Spartan program, which transformed John 117 into the Master Chief. The cutscene explains most of this, and it does a good job of informing new or lapsed players about who she is. However, Dr. Halsey is also the creator of Cortana. In fact, their relationship goes deeper than that. Cortana is an AI, formed from the cloned brain tissue from Dr. Halsey. So Dr. Halsey could be considered a mother to her in a lot of ways, if that makes sense. Aside from smoothly providing exposition, what this cutscene does brilliantly is establish the world, the tone, and the themes of the story. The interrogator is hostile towards Halsey, and she's equally as defensive. She's very supportive of her Spartan program, obviously, and he's skeptical of it. What's really crucial, though, is how they talk about the Spartans. Halsey is proud of her work on the Spartan program, yet she is incredibly cold and distant towards them.
When one human world after another fell, when my Spartans were all that stood between humanity and extinction, nobody was concerned about why they were originally built.
Both the pro and anti-Spartan side treat Spartans as machines, as weapons. They don't see Spartans as people. This is reinforced by the images of the Spartan children. They're kept in sterile metal cages walled off from each other. This immediately paints the world as a cold, harsh place. But more importantly, it brilliantly sets the stage for Master Chief. He may fight with other soldiers. He may have comrades who will watch his back in battle. But at the end of the day, when he takes the armor off, he's alone. He's seen as different. He's a hero or he's a destroyer, but he's never a man. And this is fundamentally a lonely experience, and it's one that he's experienced since he was a child. With that, we move on to our hero. 4 years later, Chief and Cortana are still aboard the Forward Unto Dawn in the cold recesses of space. Cortana is issuing distress signals. This is a tragic moment, and it reveals a lot about her character if you dig into what she's saying. First of all, the Forward Unto Dawn is drifting and lifeless. Presumably, nothing has changed with it in a long time. Yet Cortana is still issuing distress signals. I think you can extrapolate from this that she's been awake all 4 years, issuing the same signal to deaf ears. That's sad enough, but what's even sadder is her words. Notably, the phrase requesting immediate evac. The use of immediate adds a great sense of urgency to her message. It makes it seem like if her and Chief aren't evac'd right now, they'll die. Yet that's not the case. They've been drifting for years. So if they weren't evac'd immediately, would another month or two really hurt? What this shows is Cortana's desire to get off the ship. She urgently wants to get off. But why? Well, it's plain in her body language. When there is a disturbance, she appears bundled up, almost cowering at the darkness, yet looking past it longingly. She's been alone, and she doesn't want to be alone any longer. I've spent a lot of time on the opening scenes, because there is so much detail and character building that's gone into them. The game has layered upon details to point at the pain at the core of Chief and Cortana. When I talk about how Halo 4 represents the best of the franchise, well, this sort of character building is what I mean. Cortana awakens the Chief to investigate whatever intruders have reached Forward Unto Dawn. As he readies up, it's very clear that she's happy he's awoken, and she's happy to be by his side again, even if it's to deal with a threat.
Seems like old times.
Ready to get back to work?
I thought you'd never ask.
The setting of this level is great. It feels very reminiscent to the first Halo level, Pillar of Autumn. Yet the dust particles floating through the air, the darkness, and the isolation give it an entirely different vibe. Pretty soon, Chief runs into a decidedly unfriendly face. It's an elite armed with an energy sword. Unfortunately for him, one elite with a sword isn't something Chief hasn't handled before. However, Chief then says a line that bothers me.
I thought we had a truce with the Covenant.
A lot can happen in 4 years. Either way, he's probably not alone. We should be careful.
Why would he assume that the elite belongs to the Covenant? Halo 2 ended with the elites breaking off from the Covenant in a violent civil war, and Halo 3 had them fighting with humanity against the Covenant. From the Chief's point of view, assuming that an elite is part of the Covenant feels out of place. It's a bit sloppy from a world building point of view. However, ignoring this, he does raise a good point. Why are the Covenant attacking a human ship when the war has ended? Cortana answers with a vague, a lot can happen in 4 years. The answer is okay enough for now, since it makes sense that Cortana wouldn't know either. Seeing the Covenant so soon is a bit of a deflating feeling. We just spent an entire trilogy fighting them, and the very minute Chief wakes up, he's fighting them again. It takes away a little bit from the victory of Halo 3, but I'll excuse it at this point. Their presence does instill a sense of mystery about what happened in the last 4 years, and who these particular Covenant faction are and what they're after. If the game pays off this suspense, well, all's well that ends well. As we'll see though, this unfortunately isn't the case. Chief continues on and fights back the invaders. Story implications aside, it feels good to fight the Covenant again. However, there is one noticeable difference. The Covenant is considerably less chatty in this game. In prior games, the Covenant would chirp at you as you fought, especially the grunts, or you could overhear their conversations. It's part of what gives the Covenant such a unique identity. They were your ruthless enemies, sure, but they were also goofy in a way that somehow didn't take away from the threat. Simultaneously, it made them feel more human. Well, they're not human, but you know what I mean. That aspect isn't in Halo 4, at least as much, which is a bit of a bummer because they feel like a lot more flat antagonists. It also leads to this weird dialogue moment where Chief says the Covenant are more fanatical.
These Covenants seem more fanatical than the ones we fought before.
This is another example of Chief saying something that doesn't really make sense. Why, based on what he's seen so far of this Covenant, would he think they're more fanatical? If anything, they seem like the opposite of zealots. With how quiet and sullen they seem, it's as if they're the bottom of the barrel recruits that don't want to be here. This line raised an eyebrow. It's a good example of the disconnect that can happen when you tell the audience something rather than show it. I know it sounds like I'm nitpicking, but this really feeds back to the more widespread sloppiness with the world building in Halo 4, which I'll continue to talk about. The Master Chief plans on firing off the ship's missile defenses to take out the Covenant ships. Along the way, Cortana has a minor glitch, which Chief immediately picks up on.
You'll have to prime the launch for ignition.
Cortana,
It's nothing. Just get to the launch station.
Chief lets the matter drop. They have bigger concerns. He fights through Covenant and manages to launch the missile systems, taking their cruisers out. But then a beam scans him. He has a revelation. The Covenant weren't the ones scanning him earlier. There's something else out here. Whatever this entity is, it wants to suck them down to the planet that the Ford Unto Dawn currently orbits. A gravity well sucks them down, tearing down the walls and causing chaos. Chief tries to escape, but he's unable to. He's knocked unconscious and pulled down to the planet below. The title card shows. This is our introduction to Halo 4. The character work set the stage aptly, as I talked about, and there's enough mystery to pique the player's curiosity. Chief and Cortana are also not privy to the state of the world after the slumber, so it feels like we as the audience are discovering the world alongside them. This parity between what the player knows and what the characters know is another way the game bonds us to them. They crash land, and fortunately the planet isn't toxic. While Chief gathers himself, he requests intel from Cortana.
Cortana,
I'm sorry. It's the crash. I'm fine.
something was wrong even before we left the Dawn.
Chief? Really? I'm fine.
Cortana.
I was put into service 8 years ago.
8 years.
AIs deteriorate after 7, Chief.
Halsey.
Chief.
We need to find Halsey.
Chief, please.
She made you. She can fix you.
I won't recover from rampancy, Chief.
If we can just get back to Earth and find Halsey, she can fix this.
Don't make a girl a promise you can't keep.
This scene has some more great character work. It reveals the core dilemma of the story, Cortana's rampancy, but it also builds the Master Chief in a few ways. First of all, it shows how attuned Chief is to Cortana. From her little blip on the ship, he knew something was seriously wrong. He's not exactly a guy to worry over small things like that normally, so I think it's likely that he picked up on subtle cues in her voice and her words too, that something more serious has been bothering her. This sounds like a small thing, but it circles back to Halsey's opening conversation. Is Chief a man or is he a machine? Well, here, he shows a deep intimacy with another person, able to read her emotions off cues that the audience may not even pick up on. This familiarity shows that he's human, at least with her. However, we also see the machine side. He doesn't try to comfort Cortana. He identifies this as a problem, and he wants to fix it. It shows how he's a fixer by nature, and not a shoulder to cry on. And in this way, he comes across as a machine. This scene balances these two sides of Chief in a way that feels true to the character. This scene also adds more weight to Cortana's loneliness earlier. She wasn't just sitting idly in the dark. She was sitting idly in the dark, knowing she was deteriorating with each passing moment. What a miserable experience. The setting perfectly encapsulates the mood. The fort under dawn is in smoldering ruins. It's symbolic of Chief's world crashing down around him. He continues on, and they get their first glimpse of the mysterious world they've been marooned on. It's beautiful, but the towering structures also make you feel very, very small. This mission does evoke a bit of that Halo feeling from the original game, of crash landing onto a mysterious Forerunner world. They find a warthog, and as they drive on, Cortana gives him a glimmer of hope. If they get home, they may be able to recompile her neural net under the same conditions that Dr. Halsey used to create her. Cortana didn't mention this earlier because she was planning on accepting her fate. Chief's unwillingness to give up on her, though, inspired her to try. It's a great way of showing how Chief does give her comfort and hope, even if he doesn't show it in a very concrete way. They come across more Covenant, and they decide to hack one of their ships to get home. Along the way, they come across the planet's cartographer. From it, they discovered that this planet is a Forerunner shield world named Requiem. Cortana tries to discover what the Covenant are looking for, but the cartographer turns an ominous red and shuts off. Chief fights through more Covenant baddies to reactivate the cartographer, but after doing so, they receive a garbled signal. The UNSC supercarrier designated Infinity is nearby. Someone finally heard Cortana's SOS. They return to the cartographer and try to triangulate the Infinity's position. They're a bit perplexed to discover that the Infinity is actually inside of the planet. Cortana locates a terminus at the far side of the complex. They can use it to transport to the planet's core, and therefore closer to the Infinity. Something's bothering Cortana. It just doesn't seem right, but the Chief urges her on. Reaching the Infinity is her best shot of survival, so for him, there are no more questions that need to be asked. As they leave, the cartographer blinks red forebodingly. It's a hint that perhaps things aren't as they seem, and perhaps Chief and Cortana are being manipulated. Of course, more Covenant block Chief's way, so he fights through them. It's still not very clear what they're doing on the planet. Cortana discovers that the terminus is just one node of a transit grid that spans the planet. When she taps into the node nearest to the Infinity, the system responds with the Reclaimer symbol. Chief assumes that this means humanity. In the original trilogy, Reclaimer is a Forerunner term for the species meant to supplant the Forerunners, aka humanity, so his assumption here does make sense. Based on this, he assumes the system is telling them that the Infinity is there. Cortana messing with the terminus, though, has drawn a mysterious new enemy to them. There's an implication here that someone or something doesn't want them messing around with the Forerunner technology. Cortana nonetheless opens the portal and Chief rushes through. They reach the core of Requiem, but there's no Infinity to be found. The core, it seems, was intercepting and amplifying the carrier signal. They figure they can perhaps use the core satellite themselves and emit their own signal, thereby reaching the Infinity. But first, they need to take out the beams on the sides, which are creating interference. This entire segment of the story, in hindsight, is really well done. On your first playthrough, you don't really think much about what's happening. It seems like yet another mission where Chief and Cortana are figuring things out on the go, coming up with new plans and solutions to save the day. But in retrospect, it's very clear how Chief and Cortana are being manipulated into doing someone else's bidding every step of the way. When you look at the core, it even looks like a prison. The beams are creating a cage around the center, and destroying them, well, that's going to unleash whatever's inside. I really appreciate when stories manage to toe the line where you don't pick up on the cues the first go around, but when you play again, it's evident what's really going on. The mood is very ominous, and it's helped by the hazy purple color scheme. The first half of Halo 4 manages to capture that sense of awe and discovery that Halo CE did well, yet with a tinge more menacing of an atmosphere. The mysterious new enemies show up, and it's clear that they do not want Chief to get any closer to the core. Cortana picks up that they're called Prometheans. They get in contact with the Infinity, but the transmission is too garbled for communication. They pick up that the Infinity isn't in the planet at all, but instead entering its orbit. They're nearing the same gravity well that sucked Chief and Cortana in. They need to reach the Infinity before they're pulled in as well. It adds a nice sense of urgency to the latter half of the mission. Chief races to shut off the pylons and reach the core. Along the way, he comes across Covenant. It makes you wonder again what they're up to here. He reaches the core and he activates 2 pillars in the hopes of sending a message. However, his actions do something else entirely. They free the Didact from his prison.
Even these beasts recognize what you were oblivious to, human. Your nobility has blinded you, as ever.
The Prometheans we just killed were trying to stop us from doing something terrible. By manipulating the Infinity signal, the Didact played the Chief and Cortana for chumps. They fell for it, hook, line, and sinker.
The librarian left little to chance, didn't she? Turning my own guardians, my own world, against me. But what hubris to believe she could protect her pets from me forever. If you haven't mastered even these primitives, then man has not attained the mantle. Your ascendance may yet be prevented. Time was your ally, human. But now it has abandoned you. The Forerunners have returned.
So what do we learn about the Didact? Well, there's a lot to unpack here. First off, he's a Forerunner, and Forerunners are distinct from humans. It's a bit of a retcon of Halo 3's implication that ancient humans are Forerunners. Second, an entity known as the Librarian imprisoned him, turning his own Prometheans against him. With a swipe of his hand, he undoes this and reconverts the Prometheans to his side, communicated succinctly by their switch from blue to orange. Then there is something called the Mantle, which humanity has not yet attained, and because of this, a Didact thinks their ascendance can be prevented. There's a lot of interesting lore happening here. The Mantle is a philosophy that developed species should have stewardship over life, helping shepherd other species. When the Didact says that humanity hasn't achieved the Mantle, he's essentially saying that humanity isn't developed enough to take that responsibility, and thus, they are still beatable by their primitiveness. The Librarian wants humanity to take the Mantle, and views them as the true successor to the Forerunners. The Didact, however, goes against this plan and wants to prevent humanity from ascending. It's some pretty interesting stuff. However, the problem is that the Didact's speech sounds like complete gobbledygook if you haven't read the associated books or scanned wiki pages. He goes on about mantles and ascendancies, and the player's brain just tunes out, and he kind of just comes across as a generic bad guy. There are 2 parts to world building. There's the lore itself, and then more importantly, how you present this world to the audience. The second half of that equation, in my opinion, is much more important. You can have an interesting world, but it doesn't mean much if you can't make your audience resonate with it. And that's Halo 4's primary problem. It doesn't establish the lore in a way that's comprehensive and engaging for the lay player. I don't think you should have to consult outside materials to follow what's happening on a basic level. To the Didact's credit though, he does exude a menacing atmosphere. Regardless of how deeply the player understands his motives, it's clear that this guy is a world-level threat and needs to be stopped. Chief and Cortana make their escape from the crumbling core. It's a suitably climactic end to the mission. When they return to the surface, they're greeted by the Infinity about to crash. The Didact took control of their ship. With the Infinity's impact approaching, the Didact chases after it. Chief and Cortana follow. With the end of this mission, the game's central conflicts have been established. The Didact has emerged as humanity's preeminent threat, with Cortana's rampancy as an ever-present burden. Chief must fight not only to save humanity, but also for a chance to save Cortana. Along with doing YouTube, I'm also a science fiction writer. I'm going to take a quick moment to plug my sci-fi series, The Northfield Saga. It stars a man, Mark Northfield, trying to survive in a dark and desolate world consumed by toxic gas. He tries to do right, but with every step, he's challenged morally. If you enjoy the human conflict of Halo 4, I think you'd really enjoy the series. The fourth and final book releases this month, so it would mean the world if you checked out this series and considered buying it. The initial sales of a book are the most important in the Amazon algorithm's eyes, so it would be a really huge help. Either way, thanks so much for watching the video. I appreciate your support. Chief reaches the Infinity when the Didact does, and he finally picks up a distress signal from the UNSC. He rushes in to help. After fighting off Prometheans, he links up with Tom Lasky and some Spartans, including Sarah Palmer. Halo 4 is a game that gets a lot of flack for its art direction, especially around the redesign of the Spartans. I think Sarah Palmer is probably the best case for this argument. Her armor just looks strange. It's very bulky and very busy, yet it also looks weirdly not very protective. There are a lot of black parts exposed, especially her bare shoulders. With how bulky her bicep pads are, you'd think they'd cover a bit more of her shoulders. The worst part is her turtleneck thing, which removes the gap between her chin and her neck. It makes her head look like one big tube, like a turtle popping out of its shell, and not in a good way. You could make these criticisms of the other armor sets like Chief's, but I think hers is the most emblematic of the problem. There is a focus on busyness rather than a sense of functionality or an aesthetically pleasing sleekness. I'm not going to belabor the art design. I do think there are some good aspects to it, which I'll point out later, but there are definitely a lot of areas that feel like an unnecessary deviation from what worked. Lasky asks Chief to help clear out the LZs, which of course is his bread and butter. One thing that absolutely kills me about this cutscene is how Chief asks no further questions about the situation. We still don't know what the Covenant are doing here. We still don't know why we're fighting them after we achieve peace. I mean, I know Chief is a taciturn guy, but he's been asleep for 4 years. The UNSC surely knows more about the Covenant's movements than him, and now that he's established contact, now would be the perfect time to learn more of these details. It's missed opportunities like this that I'm talking about when I say that Halo 4's delivery of its lore stumbles. Now would be the perfect time to give some of that expository information naturally, but the game doesn't. Anyway, continuing on. Chief works with the UNSC to fend off the Promethean and Covenant forces. This is a very combat-heavy level and a very combat-heavy game. With that in mind, and because the Promethean's introduction means we now have all the game's enemy factions to fight, I'm going to dive into Halo 4's gameplay. I'll start with the Master Chief himself. The base mechanics of Halo 4 are pretty similar to its predecessors, with a focus on positioning and knowing when to shoot, when to throw grenades, and when to melee. It's the classic Halo triangle, and it's just as present here. Armor abilities return from Halo Reach. Sprint has been changed from an armor ability to a default mechanic. This, perhaps, is the largest change to the base mechanics, and its presence is significant. The addition of Sprint has been a controversial decision in Halo. You can look up countless videos about it. Mostly, these complaints pertain to multiplayer, where the player's added speed messes with the map flow. So I'm going to ignore the multiplayer-oriented complaints. For the campaign though, I personally think the Sprint works well. They just nailed the feel of it. And it's one of those things that's hard to put into words. There's just a weight and also a speed to it that makes you feel like you're controlling a 7-foot tall tank of a man at peak human condition. It sounds trite, but it really does feel like a Spartan run, and it adds to the feeling of power that the Master Chief rightfully exudes. It also opens up new gameplay opportunities. It's easier to bum rush enemies and get in their faces, which is especially handy with the energy sword and shotgun. My favorite tactic is to sprint and then jump at the end, launching yourself like a meteor. This can be great to run and jump around corners, catching your enemies unaware and making it harder for them to target you. All of these techniques overall feed into that same power fantasy of the Master Chief. So that's Sprint. What about the other armor abilities? A lot of them return from Reach, such as the Camo, Hologram, and Jetpack, and there are a few new additions, such as the Hard Light Shield and Auto Sentry. I found them all very fun, and I found a use for all of them in one situation or another. The Hard Light Shield was good to back out of a fight if I got a little too aggressive, and well, the Jetpack is just a blast. They add spice and variation to the gameplay. My main criticism is that the selection of abilities to choose from is pretty constrained per mission, and a lot of abilities only show up once or twice. For instance, I think Thrust only shows up in one mission, and I only remember getting active camo in one mission too. These are really fun abilities, and I wish I could have gotten my hands on them more often. Reach often let you pick between a handful of Spartan abilities for a given encounter, but this happens a lot less frequently in 4. You're often stuck with the single ability that the mission deems necessary. It cuts down a little on the feeling of experimentation with the sandbox that this series is often so good at. Speaking of the sandbox, let's move on to weapons. Halo 4 makes a lot of changes to the game's arsenal, and this too has been controversial. First off, there's the visual differences. For instance, the battle rifle has gone through a complete overhaul visually, and same goes for the shotgun. A lot of people hate these reworks, but to be honest, I don't really mind them all that much. There are also some lore inconsistencies, with it not making much sense why the Infinity would be using these new models. However, the entire game has gone through an art direction overhaul that clashes with the lore, so I'm not sure if it's worth calling out the weapons specifically. The weapons all feel great to use, especially the UNSC weapons. For me, they just nailed that feeling of power and lethality, and they're a lot of fun. On the Covenant side, I really appreciate the Covenant Carbine and Storm Rifle. Then there are the new Promethean weapons. The Light Rifle, the Bolt Shot, and my favorite, the Scatter Shot, all feel satisfying too. They're often equipped with the secondary fire mode, which helps them stand out from the rest of the arsenal. The Light Rifle fires in 3-round bursts until you scope in, where it then changes to a single shot. If you hold down the trigger on the Bolt Shot, it becomes a pocket shotgun. The suppressor's a little bit of a miss for me, but I'm not going to nitpick. Overall, I appreciate their aesthetic design. The floating bits and pieces instill an alien feeling, and the orange-gray color scheme works. So I think there's a lot to like. However, there are problems. Halo has always prided itself on a weapon sandbox where every gun serves a unique role. Combat Evolved is the best example of this. The Needler is a high-powered beast to take down elites. Meanwhile, the pistol is a great mid-range option. And the Assault Rifle is great for taking down minor flood forms. I could go on, but you get the point. That design philosophy goes by the wayside a bit in Halo 4. A lot of weapons serve similar roles. For instance, the Assault Rifle, Suppressor, and Storm Rifle all sort of serve the role of close-range spray weapons. There isn't a ton of distinction between picking one or another. I'm not as big of a stickler on the sandbox purity as other Halo fans. Variety is the spice of life after all. The Battle Rifle and the Light Rifle feel very different, even if they occupy the same role, so I appreciate having both in the game. However, the game still wants you to use all the weapons, and the game's biggest gameplay problem comes from how it encourages the player to do so. See, Halo 4 has an ammo problem, as in the game gives you a pittance for each gun. It's rare to get through a single encounter without having to switch weapons. Most missions have you start with UNSC weapons, but good luck getting through more than 2 fights without switching to Covenant or Promethean guns. This gameplay decision forces you to use all of the weapons. You'll use Covenant and Promethean guns, whether you like it or not. You're not going to choose between using the AR, the Suppressor, or Storm Rifle. You're going to start with the AR, run out of ammo, then pick up the Suppressor or Storm Rifle, depending on if you're fighting Prometheans or Covenant. So as you can see, through this limited ammo, Halo 4 does succeed at having the player use all the weapons in the sandbox. The problem is, it's just not very fun. Feeling like you have to swap weapons constantly is frustrating. Earlier I spoke about how Sprint added to the power fantasy of Master Chief. While the lack of ammo completely undercuts it, you feel more like a scavenger than a warrior at times. It's especially a bummer too because the UNSC weapons are my favorites to use, but I only ended up using them like 20% of the time just because I didn't have ammo. In the game's penultimate mission, there are a lot of UNSC weapons lying around, and you don't run out of ammo. And man, the night and day difference in fun factor was crazy. It's one of those cases where the cure is worse than the disease. I wish they would have just given you more ammo and then let the player choose when to use each one. If that resulted in players not using a given weapon enough, well then maybe that weapon should have just been tweaked. But that's enough about the weapons. They're only as good as the enemies you fight, right? So let's talk about the Covenant and Prometheans. How are the Covenant to fight in this game? Well, they're good. But there's a caveat. They're not as good as they are in prior games. Why is that? Well, first and most importantly, they just don't seem as formidable. I recall an interview with 343 where a developer said that they made sacrifices to the enemy AI in order to achieve Halo 4's graphical fidelity. A fidelity which, by the way, is impressive even 12 years later. Art direction opinions aside, Halo 4 is a fantastic looking game. I can't point to specific examples, but the AI difference is something you just sort of feel when playing. The enemies seem to stand around a bit more and not really plan or coordinate. I'm not really sure the trade-off was worth it in retrospect. What compounds this problem is the lack of enemy chatter, which I spoke about earlier. Enemy chatter is one of those things in games that really helps create a sense of immersion, personality, and intelligence in your opponents, and its lack in Halo 4 definitely feels missed. However, despite these problems, the Covenant are still an immaculately designed enemy faction. Their various ranks complement each other perfectly. With that in mind, the Covenant and Halo 4 are still some of the better enemies to fight in first-person shooters, so I don't want to sound like I'm dogging on them too much. On to the new addition, the Prometheans. A lot of people really hate this faction, but I have a little bit of an affinity for them. I think there are some interesting ideas at play, but as what seems universal with Halo 4, there are problems that come with them. I'll start with the good. First of all, the Prometheans are genuinely different from the Flood and the Covenant. It would have been easy to just reskin or slightly tweak one of these factions, but 343 really tried to create something entirely different to fight. I appreciate that effort, and for good or bad, the Prometheans' presence adds significant variety to the gunfights. Let's go over the enemy units. First up is the Crawlers, and I don't have any complaints with them. They're not a threat alone, but in numbers they can pose a threat. They can climb on walls, meaning you need to look up as well as around you. Lastly, they generally explode when shot, which makes them fun to shoot. The drones are pretty good too. They're mainly support units able to revive the Knights. What I like is that they're somewhat the inverse of the Covenant. If you kill an elite, the grunts will often turn tail. This means killing the elite first is often the best tactic. With the Prometheans, the prioritization is the opposite. You want to take care of the drones first, otherwise they can keep bringing the Knights back to life. Lastly, there are the Knights. They're a bit clunky, and this is mainly due to their teleport. They randomly teleport around the map, which isn't a bad mechanic in of itself, but there are problems. They seem to enter an invincible state right when they begin to teleport. This is frustrating when you're 1 or 2 shots away from killing them and your subsequent bullets do nothing. It really kills the kinetic feedback of shooting, and it makes them feel unsatisfying to beat sometimes. Secondly, the teleport can make them feel pretty cheap, especially the scattershot wielding variety. They can close the distance instantly and brain you, which feels really bad. These problems aren't frequent enough to be game ruining, but it makes the Prometheans feel clunky. Overall, I think the main problem with the Prometheans is that they just overstay their welcome. You fight a lot of Prometheans in Halo 4, and they're just not as fun to fight as the Covenant. I think saving them for the final couple of missions would have made their flaws a lot less grating. Lastly, I want to talk about the vehicles, because I think this is another high note for Halo 4. I'm not generally a huge fan of vehicle segments in games. There's nothing wrong with them, it's just a personal preference. With that said, I still really appreciated the vehicle segments in Halo 4. I feel like they're paced perfectly, always offering a welcome change of pace while not overstaying their welcome. There's good variety too, from races on Ghosts to classic Scorpion tank segments. The highlight for me without a doubt is the Mantis. This bipedal mech is an absolute blast to use. It's the perfect blend of infantry style and vehicular combat. I wouldn't have minded even more Mantis segments, which, given how I don't like vehicle segments, is the highest compliment I can give. So, bringing it all together, Halo 4's combat is one of those classic one step forward, 2 step back cases. Things like sprint and armor abilities are implemented well, and the sandbox has been expanded, but these positives are hampered by ammo and enemy design problems. In a nutshell, it's the worst gameplay in the series thus far, but that's a pretty darn high bar. Halo 4 is still a lot of fun to play. Okay, so I know that was a detour, but I think the combat's pros and cons are all connected, so it was worth going over everything at once. Back to the battle. The Chief helps the UNSC fight off the Covenant and the Didact. Covenant ships lay in ruin, and the Didact dips out with his tail between his legs. Mission accomplished. Humanity gets to fight another day. Chief meets with Captain Del Rio and Lasky. The captain provides some welcome exposition on what the Infinity is doing out near Requiem and what its overall mission is.
Infinity's mission has been to locate the remaining Halo rings and establish permanent bases to study them for decommission. We got locations up and running around installations 5 and 3, but lately they've run into some setbacks.
A science team got zapped excavating a Forerunner artifact. This sensor data is all that was left.
Interesting. These symbols are a derivation of the Forerunner glyph system.
And our geeks managed to pull some coordinates. I'll give you 3 guesses where it led.
By the way, this would have been another great time to sneak in what the Covenant are up to on Requiem, because the UNSC certainly doesn't seem fazed that they're attacking humanity again. When they talk about what to do next, well, Del Rio disagrees with Chief.
This is a first contact scenario, Master Chief. Priority is to free Infinity from Requiem's gravity well and file a threat assessment back at FleetCom.
You mean we're leaving?
Sir, Infinity drove the Didact back. He's vulnerable.
He isn't the only one.
I do think both of their perspectives make sense. Chief has encountered the Didact firsthand, and he knows the dire threat he presents, and he's seen the Didact's hatred of humanity up close. From Del Rio's perspective, however, the Infinity is alone on an unfamiliar planet with an unknown enemy. It makes sense that he's hesitant to bull rush an enemy he has very little intel on. Chief may not agree, but he's still a soldier, so he follows orders. He sets out with Lasky to free the Infinity from the gravity well. However, when the mission begins, we start to see how stubborn Del Rio can be.
Captain, what's Force Recon's assessment of the terrain?
I know you've been off the field for a while, Master Chief, but this is a blow-through op. Sending in recon would just slow us down.
This is a trait that will certainly persist. They proceed on with the mission, and thus begins my favorite level in the game, Reclaimer. Chief rides aboard the Mammoth, a giant moving vehicle, and he has to protect it from attacking Covenant forces. Oftentimes, he has to disembark to take out key targets. You're equipped with the jetpack, and you have all manner of weaponry at your disposal, including the sniper. At one point, you even beam up to a Covenant cruiser to take it down, in classic Halo style. It's just a very open-ended kinetic mission. You have a lot of tools at your disposal, and you have a ton of ways to take down your opponents. The set piece of the Mammoth is great, with you jetpacking onto and off of it as the mission progresses. It's easily Halo 4's level design at its best, and I wish we would have received more open missions like it. Eventually, Chief and Cortana reach the Forerunner control system to shut off the particle cannons. However, she's seemingly pulled into the system, so he goes off to find her. Instead, he encounters an entirely different entity, the Librarian.
My memories will retain to assist humanity on their path to the mantle. Though sadly, that plan is now at risk. The Didact is leaving Requiem. Soon. You must not allow it.
Leaving.
He seeks this. The Composer. A device which will allow him to finally contain the greatest enemy ever faced by the Forerunners. You.
Man, there's a lot to unpack with this cutscene. You could spend an entire hour dissecting it, but I'll try to keep things short. I'll start with the basics. The cutscene succeeds at communicating necessary plot details that even the layman can understand. We finally learn what the Didact is after. He's seeking a device named the Composer, which will allow him to contain humans. He perceives humans as the greatest threat to the Forerunners, and the reason why dates back to a fierce war between humans and Forerunners. The Didact defended against what he perceived as relentless human aggression. From humanity's perspective though, they were running from the Flood. Originally, the Composer had been intended for Forerunner transcendence, but the Didact saw another use for it. He wanted to save the galaxy by containing humanity. For this, the Forerunners imprisoned the Didact. Then the game delivers the second piece of crucial information. The Librarian implanted something called the Gene Sung in the human race, passed down for generations and generations. The main takeaway from this is that Chief is immune to the Composer's effects. All of this is explained in the cutscene. However, the cutscene still feels very confusing and hard to follow. Why is that? Well, there are a lot of terms and concepts sprinkled in that haven't been explained to the player. There's the mantle, which I talked about earlier, then there's the ancilla, and then there's also indexing humanity for population and so on. This excess terminology confuses the player and makes it hard to understand what's going on. The high number of these unexplained terms make it feel like you're missing out on key information. I think the problem with this is best explained by contrast. Halo 2 has an incredible amount of world building. The entire Covenant faction is fleshed out, and the player learns about their social structure, religion, and so on. Meanwhile, humanity is also fleshed out, as well as the Flood. I would say that it has at least as much world building as Halo 4. Yet while playing, everything in Halo 2 feels perfectly understandable. The lore is delivered in a digestible way to the player, without requiring them to consult outside materials. I think this cutscene is the most emblematic example. The information communicated in this cutscene is important, and it's interesting, but it's nonetheless delivered in a way where the player will most likely walk away confused than anything else. As I said, there is a lot more I could dive into here. For instance, the Ancilla is an AI that accompanied Forerunners, much like Cortana does for Chief. But in the interest of pace, I'm going to move on. The Librarian unlocks this Gene Sung in Chief, and he's pulled out of the vision. He reunites with Cortana. The Librarian summoned her to explain the situation as well. They proceed with their mission and they successfully destroy the gravity well. The Infinity can now leave Requiem. The question is, should they? After what Cortana and Chief have seen, they're pretty firmly on the no side. The Didact is too dangerous to leave on his own, growing in strength and power. Del Rio, though, is still insistent that they should leave. In his eyes, the Infinity can't stand much more punishment, and frankly, he doesn't believe the visions Chief and Cortana saw. Cortana grows frustrated by his stubbornness, and she has an outburst.
I will not allow you to leave this planet!
Cortana.
I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to do that.
Commander Lasky. Pursuant to Article 55 of UNSC Regulation 12-14572, I'm ordering you to remove that AI's data chip and retire it for final dispensation.
I don't want to. You don't want me to.
Remove
Please.
the chip now, Commander.
Please. I don't want to.
Give me that chip.
The Didact has to be stopped. If you won't do that, I will.
I am ordering you to surrender that AI!
No, sir.
This is a big moment for Chief. As far as I can recall, this is the first time he's disobeyed an order, at least this directly. He's a soldier and he's always played that role well. Even earlier when he disagreed with Del Rio, he still followed the captain's orders. He reaches his breaking point though when he thinks Cortana is threatened. This action says more about his care for her than just about anything else in the game. He's willing to break away from the command structure he's always followed for her sake. Cortana's deterioration has taken a back seat in the last couple of missions, but it's coming back to the forefront. Del Rio orders Chief arrested, but nobody makes a move. This action too speaks volumes for the respect the crew have for the Chief, in contrast to Del Rio. He tells Lasky to warn Earth, while he and Cortana will do what they can to stop the Didact. They have a moment of quiet before setting out, and Cortana reflects.
I can give you over 40,000 reasons why I know that sun isn't real. I know it because the emitter's Rayleigh effect is disproportionate to its suggested size. I know it because its stellar cycle is more symmetrical than that of an actual star. But for all that, I'll never actually know if it looks real, if it feels real. Before this is all over, promise me you'll figure out which one of us is the machine.
Cortana is coming to grips with the end of her life, and she's reflecting on her experiences and what she can consider real. For an AI, that sort of questioning makes sense, but what really makes this cutscene work is the subtext. Subtext is when a character says one thing, but they're really talking about another thing indirectly. She's rambling about stellar cycles, but in reality she's not all that concerned about whether she's experiencing them. What she's really thinking about, what she's really worried about, is her relationship with Chief. Her last line seems a bit out of place initially because it seems like such a topical pivot. However, it's revealing what she's really thinking about. If either of them is purely a machine, does that mean their relationship was just a simulacrum? If Chief is a machine, will he care if she's replaced? We'll see this fear continue throughout the story. Chief and Cortana plan to chase down the Didact. Lasky disobeys orders and supplies them with a pelican, so they set off. They reach the Forerunner docking vessel where the Didact ship is stationed. This segment isn't super interesting mechanically, as you're not given a lot to do in the Pelican except to fly between mission objectives. Nonetheless, I love the scenery and spectacle of it. One thing Halo 4's art direction really succeeds at is creating a sense of scale, especially when it comes to Forerunner architecture. Chief and Cortana fight through the Forerunner structures, fighting off Prometheans. They aim to shut off the Didact's defenses. There are more signs of Cortana's deterioration. Screen and audio distortions, that sort of thing. Meanwhile, the Didact taunts Chief. Once again, he brings up the mantle, and if you understand the lore underpinning his words, it's another reinforcement of his belief in Forerunner ascendancy. However, if you didn't consult outside sources, I think it's really easy for the Didact to fade into just another generic bad guy. They reach the control spire, and Chief inserts Cortana to stop the Didact. However, she has another episode instead.
Imprison them!
What are you doing? bottom line. They're leaving.
I'm sorry, I don't know what...
This marks a pivotal change in the story. Previously, Cortana's condition was an inconvenience, but she still managed to perform her job. For the first time, she's let down the Master Chief. She's failed. There's truth emerging from Del Rio's words. She's starting to become a liability. The Didact Sphere enters a large vessel and departs. Chief manages to hitch a ride and follow it. Its destination? Well, it's none other than a Halo ring, specifically Installation 03, where the Infinity found the coordinates to Requiem. However, the Didact's not heading to the ring. Instead, he's heading to the UNSC research station, the same one that Del Rio mentioned earlier. Cortana puts two and two together. The composer's the artifact that the UNSC extracted, and it's on the research station. This is what the Didact is after. Chief establishes contact with the head researcher, Dr. Tilson, and he tells her to defend the artifact at all costs. Their ship comes in for landing, but Cortana has another episode. Their ship crashes. Cortana has failed Chief again. That makes two failures in close proximity, reinforcing how she's now a liability. One of the biggest criticisms of the Cortana rampancy subplot is its pacing, and while I agree with this criticism, the pacing of Cortana's rampancy is odd. She has small episodes in the first handful of missions. Then her rampancy seems to fall by the wayside in the game's second act, and the focus shifts almost entirely to the Didact. There are a few small bits here and there, but overall the plot is put on the back burner. Then when Act 3 starts, the rampancy notch is cranked to 10 and she's pretty much non-functional. I guess the best way to put it is that there isn't a steady feeling of decline. The rampancy can come across as feeling plot motivated, rather than feeling like a natural outgrowth of the world, if that makes sense. I think the rampancy subplot would have been more effective if it had more of a presence in the middle of the game, instead of being put on the sidelines, if it instead felt more like a looming force or an inevitability. Let's see more of the build-up of her decline, rather than her suddenly spiraling in the game's closing hours. Halo 4 is a short game, so it really needed to capitalize on every moment of screen time to pull players in and build an emotional connection with this conflict. It still works for some, including me, but this jarring pacing is where the rampancy subplot lost a lot of people. Another thing to note is that in-world, Cortana's decline doesn't really make a lot of sense either. At the start of Halo 4, Cortana's had rampancy for over a year, yet over an entire year, her affliction has resulted in just a few small glitches. The plot of Halo 4 occurs in the span of a couple of days, maybe a couple weeks at most, and in that short span, Cortana completely nosedives. Even more so, the decline really only happens in the last segment, maybe the last day or two. I know in real life, declines can be sharp with the types of diseases that rampancy is paralleling. Even still, this feels excessive. As I said, rampancy can feel more plot motivated than organic. Cortana's issues aside, Chief does his best to defend the station. This level has some of my favorite combat in the game, with a focus on close quarters brawls with the Covenant. You get the thruster, which is another one of my favorite abilities, especially paired with the shotgun. There's another Manta segment too, which as I mentioned I'm a huge fan of. On top of that, even though this mission takes place on a station, there are some incredible vistas. Once again, Halo 4 manages to create this sense of awe and wonder through scale, and it's the highlight of its art direction for me. Despite trying his best, the Chief ultimately fails. The Didact gets his hand on the composer and fires it off, killing everyone in the station. It's a horrifying scene, and it successfully demonstrates the stakes of the story. It shows what will happen to all of humanity if the Didact isn't stopped. The best part of this cutscene though is Chief's reaction when Dr. Tillman is vaporized. It just communicates so much about the type of man he is. Somehow, the scene manages to convey so much agony, sorrow, and pain within him. The way his arms are outstretched, he's still trying to save her, even as she fades to ashes in front of his sights. In a nutshell, this reaction alone is a rebuttal to the claim that Master Chief is a machine. It shows that he does care about people, even if he's distant to them. The librarian's words prove true. Chief is immune to the composer, and he survives. When he finally comes to, Cortana is curled up in a protective position, the same she started the game as. She can't stop thinking about the screams. It's clear she puts a lot of the blame on herself. Chief, though, wants to keep moving. He wants to keep focus on the action. He wants to focus on what he can do, not say. Cortana then has a moment of vulnerability.
They'll pair you with another AI. Maybe even another Cortana model if Halsey lets them.
That's not going to happen.
It won't be me. You know that, right?
This is her fear from earlier springing up. She wants to know their relationship is real, but really deep down, she just wants to know that Chief cares about her. The thing is, he's demonstrated his care for her already through his actions. He's doing everything he can to save her, and he's even disobeyed orders for her. However, he hasn't really shown it through his words. And sometimes actions aren't enough. Sometimes you just want someone to outright say they care about you. Chief doesn't do it. He remains silent. He's a man of actions, not of words, and he's entirely out of his depths here. I think he fails in a way. And that is what I especially appreciate about the Rampancy conflict. Throughout the original trilogy, Chief never really came up against a problem he couldn't physically conquer. The Covenant even nicknamed him Demon. In Halo 4 though, he's given a conflict that he can't solve physically. He can't fight Cortana's illness, and while we get to see just how much he struggles with a conflict like this, the fact that he doesn't always do a good job, in my mind, is another reason this subplot works so well. Cortana and Chief feel very true to their characters, flaws and all. But the fight isn't over, not yet. They set off to stop the Didact. The final mission begins with a fun vehicle segment that plays pretty differently to the others in the game. It's another example of how well done the vehicle segments are in the campaign. Chief radios into the Infinity, and Lasky responds instead of Rio. Rio's superiors evidently didn't like him abandoning Requiem, and he's been replaced by Lasky. Good news for us, because Lasky's willing to lend a hand. The Infinity blasts a hole into the vessel once Chief takes on its defenses. It ties a nice little bow onto the UNSC subplot, and it's a vindication for Chief and Cortana. Chief brings aboard a nuke. He's going to end this. They fight their way to the center where the Didact has shielded himself. Cortana comes up with a clever solution. She can use her rampancy against the Didact by allowing her consciousness to split and overwhelm his system. It shows Cortana's persistence and ingenuity. Even in the face of her condition, she's still able to concoct plans to help Chief. He fights on to inject her rampant personalities into the system, and the Didact meanwhile taunts him. Again, his jabs come across as fairly generic. Eventually they break down the barrier and Chief approaches their enemy. The Chief doesn't fight the Didact in a boss battle. This is the end of gameplay. It's a bit anticlimactic that we don't actually get to fight him, but I see why the game went this route. The Didact is quickly able to overwhelm the Chief, and he has our hero on the ropes. Cortana emerges and she uses her rampancy to bind the Didact. What this shows is that the Didact isn't a threat that the Chief can beat, not without Cortana. I see how having a boss fight might undercut this, although I still would have preferred it. Even then, the conflict between him and the Didact is really short, so it still nonetheless is pretty anticlimactic. Chief detonates the bomb. Instead of dying, he finds himself with Cortana. They share one last moment together. She explains how she saved him, and that there's no longer any chance of saving her.
It was my job to take care of you.
We were supposed to take care of each other. And we did.
Cortana, please. Wait.
Welcome home, John.
What makes this cutscene especially tragic for me is Chief's wait at the end. It seems like he's finally going to say something to her, to tell her that he does care, but he's just unable to. It's not in his nature. For all the years of isolation, of all the years of fighting, he just can't bring that level of vulnerability outside of himself. In some ways, it feels unsatisfying that he doesn't tell her that he cares, but that imperfection is what makes it feel so human. Cortana also cuts him off. She knows this about him too. After this, Chief is recovered by the UNSC. He stares out at the Earth. It seems he's wondering what's left for him out there anymore. He has a conversation with Lasky. Chief is his cold and distant self, pulling back into his shell. Lasky doesn't buy it though. He may not understand Chief fully, but he knows he's a man like any other behind the helmet. The game ends with Chief walking amongst his fellow men, bearing their stares. He's still different and still apart from the others. Yet the game ends with him peeling off his armor, a final symbolic statement that he is in fact a man underneath. During this, a speech by the Didact plays, and while this is the most interesting dialogue he gets in the entire game, it goes more into the concepts I discussed earlier, and it paints him in a more sympathetic light. Here he seems less like a domineering conqueror and more like a man who wants to save his people. I wish he had been developed like this before his death. Lastly, there's a 343 message injected in the middle about how this is the beginning of a new journey for Halo. The reason I mention this is because it highlights something really interesting about Halo 4. The game is the start of a new journey, but at its heart, it really feels like an ending. It's a goodbye to Chief and Cortana, the duo that had been the glue of the Halo series. The game to me is 343's attempt to transition from Bungie's version of Halo to theirs, saying goodbye to the old dynamics of Halo to usher in their own vision, which is what we get with Halo 5, for good or bad. But I think that's the most succinct way to describe Halo 4, is a long goodbye. So that's Halo 4's campaign. We went over a lot of the good and the bad, and hopefully through that you can see why this is a divisive game. The gameplay is one step forward and one or two steps back. The art design is shaky, with some great environments but also some questionable changes. Ultimately though, I think your enjoyment of Halo 4's campaign hinges on whether or not you can buy into Chief and Cortana's conflict with her rampancy. It's really the beating heart of the game. As I talked about, there are certainly reasons someone wouldn't be drawn to it, namely its pacing. However, there is a lot of intricate storytelling going on, with subtext, double meanings, and consistent characterization which makes their conflict feel both raw and real. If you can resonate with their story well, I think that can essentially carry the rest of the experience. Whether or not you care about the Didact scheme stops mattering because you already have enough motivation to fight him. You want to stop the Didact so you can go back to Earth and focus on saving Cortana. Their dynamic strikes a deep chord with many players, including myself. Flaws and all, I really resonate with Halo 4's depiction of their relationship and their struggle. Because of that, I have an especially fond view of this campaign, even if I recognize the other issues. As I said, it's enough to carry the game. But if this plot doesn't resonate, it's a story that can leave players cold, especially if they're more into other aspects like world building. Good or bad, Halo 4 is essentially a wiping of the slate that came before, setting the stage for Halo 5 to run free with its own vision. Halo 4 was a transitional game for the Halo franchise. It was 343 Industries' first installment in the series, yet it served as a goodbye to the Halo of old, mainly Chief and Cortana's relationship. With the end of Halo 4 came the promise that the series would be venturing into uncharted waters. After having moved from the legacy that came before, 343 would take the series in their own direction. Initially, the studio hooked players in with their compelling Hunt the Truth marketing campaign. Unfortunately though, this marketing campaign didn't reflect the actual game. Halo 5 was received as a massive disappointment, and 343's vision didn't land as anybody would have hoped. Halo 5's campaign is the most reviled in the entire series. I think you could make a sound argument that it's one of the most hated campaigns of all time, especially when you consider the pedigree of the franchise it came from. Years ago, I bought an Xbox specifically for Halo 5, and yet I entirely avoided the campaign because of all the bad things I had heard about it. Even though I fell in love with the multiplayer mode, I still hadn't touched the campaign up until now. Well, I finally took the leap, and I peeled back the layers of Halo 5's story, its gameplay, its art direction, and so on. So, do I think it's as bad as people say? It's more complicated, certainly. The campaign has flickers of brilliance throughout. There are ideas, both story and gameplay-wise, which I find very captivating. However, the flaws run deep, and they are undeniable. And they all trace back to a single fundamental flaw, whose tendrils wrap around all the game's elements in a chokehold. So let's get started. We'll walk through the campaign and explore the game's various elements. We'll see how they work together and how they work against each other. Finally, we'll land on the game's fundamental flaw. So grab your helmet, Spartan, and let's dive in. Halo 5 opens with a cutscene, where Dr. Halsey addresses Jameson Locke, our new co-protagonist, and it ends with intrigue.
Once this is over, after all I have done, they'll order you to kill us both.
The cutscene successfully establishes a sense of mystery, which is a focus in the opening hours of the campaign. This cutscene also establishes that, despite Halo 4's ending, Cortana's role in Halo's story isn't over. Not yet. The story transitions to Spartan Jameson Locke and his team Osiris. This isn't Osiris' first appearance. They were also featured in a TV show called Halo Nightfall, which bridges the gap between Halo 4 and 5. The 343 Halo games have a tendency to rely on outside media to tell their stories, which I'm not a fan of. I think the story of a video game-centric series should be reliant on the games themselves. External sources should be supplemental, not required viewing, so I'm going to treat them as such. With that in mind, for many players, this is Osiris' introduction. That is with the exception of Spartan Edward Buck, who's one of the ODSTs in Halo ODST. He's one of my favorite characters in the series, and it's welcome to see a familiar face. We don't get much of their individual characters right away. Team Osiris is down to business. Their mission is to recover Dr. Halsey from a Covenant warlord named Jul Madama. There have been Forerunner attacks that Halsey has information on, so recovering her is crucial. This lack of character development is fine for now. Both ODST and Reach introduced us to a fresh new team without much context, and it worked out well for those games. In theory, the same approach could have worked for Halo 5. We'll see though how its execution plays out. The Spartans deploy, and we get a long cinematic of Osiris fighting through the Covenant. This cutscene is made fun of a lot by the Halo community for being over the top. While it's a bit cheesy, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. It shows the competency of the team, and it's good at amping the player up for gameplay. Many of the moves that the Spartans pull off are things you can do in-game with the Spartan abilities, which is pretty cool. I'll dive much more into gameplay later though. We take the shoes as Spartan lock, and gameplay begins. One thing that's immediately striking is how much effort and detail has gone into the environments, and this is a point I will continue to make throughout the video. In this level, there's so much happening in the background while you fight. A sea of Covenant ships war in the air, with explosions erupting and tracer rounds flying about. The chaos and activity really sells the scale of battle in a way few other Halo games match. It's framed really well by a looming Covenant cruiser and Forerunner structure. There is attention to the use of color, with an almost painterly effect. The environments of Halo 5 are composed like paintings, but they're given life and vibrancy through the movement. Halo 5's art direction is very controversial. It strays far from the boots on the ground aesthetic of its predecessors. Spartans look less like soldiers and more like Power Rangers. The Covenant look more round and less threatening. However, when you look at these complaints, most of them are focused on character design. For me, it's a shame that the environmental design isn't given the credit it deserves. Throughout the level, we get a bit more background on both Osiris and Jul Madama.
How'd you learn to speak Sangheili, Vale? When I was a kid, I was stuck on a diplomatic shuttle adrift in deep space for 6 months. My options were be real bored or spend the time getting smart. Must have dealt a blow to Imdama's authority when the Prometheans turned on him. Gained a lot of followers, styling himself as a Forerunner prophet.
Jul Imdama is an opportunist, not a leader.
Overall, I feel this exposition is decently done. It feels like we're getting to know the Spartans a little bit, and there's enough info on the villain for the player to not feel completely lost. The Spartans recover Halsey, and they take out the Covenant warlord. The doctor lost her arm, which is a bit jarring. It was mentioned earlier by the Spartans, but it feels like just one more small thing that happened off screen that the player needs to take into account. It's small, but along with the introduction of Osiris' team, it feels like there's this cumulative effect that you're missing something as the player. It feels like you're coming in 30 minutes late to the start of a movie. When Halsey is brought back to safety, she has a discussion with Lasky and it's urgent.
Captain Lasky, I sent you my position 3 weeks ago. I told you this was happening.
We'll discuss that in private, Doctor. Palmer.
What has she done? How far has it already gone?
Based on the introduction, the player can surmise that Halsey is talking about Cortana, or at least something related to her. This builds intrigue, because Cortana is still dead as far as we know. In its opening hours, Halo 5 does a pretty decent job of building suspense about its central mystery. The thing about mysteries though, is that they're pretty contingent on the quality and execution of their revelations. The story transitions to the game's other principal perspective, that of Blue Team led by Master Chief. The team is composed of the Chief, Fred, Kelly, and Linda. It follows the same pattern as Osiris. This is a team whose members have been introduced in other media. For instance, I read The Fall of Reach, so I recognize all of the Blue Team members. However, their introduction in the game is jarring. They treat Chief like old war buddies, which yes, canonically they are, but for fans who have only played the games, it feels very abrupt. We've played 4 other games with Master Chief, with nary a mention of his old comrades. He's always been portrayed as a loner, especially in Halo 4, yet now here he is with a group of buddies. I feel like there needed to be some sort of introductory cutscene here, something more to explain Chief's transition from being fully alone to reuniting with his old squad. I feel like that additional context would have gone a long way towards easing the player into Blue Team. But herein lies Halo 5's great challenge. It has 2 entirely separate squads that it wants the player to identify and bond with over the span of a campaign, which has a short runtime. In my Halo Reach retrospective, I spoke about how difficult that task is with just 1 squad. Is it possible to do with 2? Well, we'll see. Anyways, continuing on. When they arrive at their objective, Linda gives more background on the mission.
Coney Research Station. Went dark 19 months ago. Last week, Kigyar scavengers found it and sold the find to Julem Dama's people.
We clear the Covenant and return this station to Oni.
It's a simple objective. Given everything else the player has to take in with Halo 5, I appreciate a more straightforward mission. This is one of my favorite levels in the game too. It feels like it perfectly complements Halo 5's combat design. I'll delve more into it later, but I just can't help myself. Chief suddenly is drawn into a vision. The sense of mystery builds. Chief saw Cortana die. Is this the true Cortana, and if so, how is she still alive? Cortana seems welcoming, but Halsey's prior fear gives this cutscene an ominous air.
You said she was gone.
I watched her die. We have a mission to focus on. We can talk about this later. Lights on.
In typical Chief fashion, he doesn't want to talk about it, and instead wants to push on with their mission. More Covenant are inbound, so instead of salvaging the station, they opt to destroy it. When the mission is complete, Chief heads to Meridian in hunt of Cortana to see if she's truly alive. He does this in direct opposition to the UNSC's orders. Here we see some character growth from Halo 4. In that game, it was a big moment when Chief disobeyed a direct order. Now he does so without a second thought. There are some other signs of Chief's personality change from the events of Halo 4. At the beginning of the mission, Fred expresses concern that Chief is pressing himself too hard.
I haven't seen Chief press himself like this since we were in boot camp.
He's fine, Fred.
This many missions non-stop isn't fun.
This is likely an expression of his grief after the loss of Cortana. He is throwing himself into his work. Chief plans on finding Cortana on his own, but Blue Team joins him. They're loyal to their leader no matter the cost. The members of Blue Team are likable enough at this point, if unremarkable. Perspective switches back to Halsey. She confirms that Cortana is the entity she fears and that she's a danger to the entire galaxy.
Master Chief believes she contacted him.
No, John must not speak to her.
He's gone in search of her.
You let him go?
How is Nobody lets the Chief do anything. He does what he wants.
Until 0631 this morning, when he was declared absent without leave.
This isn't about the Master
John
Chief.
is not equipped emotionally to deal with her as a threat.
Hey! Is anyone gonna answer me?
I think this is a really interesting dynamic. Halsey wants Chief detained, not because she thinks he's a threat personally, but because she's afraid that Cortana will break him. She hunts him not to persecute him, but to protect him. The story has done a good job of formulating a bunch of questions. From this cutscene, we have a few more. Why is Halsey so certain Cortana's a threat? What has she found out? And is she right? Is it good or bad that Chief is going after her? The prompting of these questions, I think, make the core mystery fairly compelling, and it certainly motivated me to continue playing. Buck and Locke prepare to go after Chief. Buck is very unhappy about these orders, but Locke is very stoic.
Every other Spartan, every soldier, when they hear about this, they're gonna hate us. You know that, right?
You're not the only one here because of him.
I love this interaction. There's just such a weight to Locke. With how stoic he is, I expected him to give a defense like that they're just following orders, or that Chief needs to be leashed. Instead, he acknowledges that he owes Chief a debt, and he gives no defense for his actions. I find this really interesting because it's not the reaction you'd expect, and it made me want to learn more about his character and personality. Like I talked about earlier with Chief, there are these small hints of complexity and nuance with the characters. The game, however, never really gives them time to develop. Osiris heads to Meridian in search of Blue Team. Meridian is an indie human colony. Human settlements on other worlds have been talked about throughout the Halo franchise, but we've only really gotten to witness Reach and Earth in-game. Later on, we get to explore another world discussed in the lore. Halo 5 gives us a more expanded view of the Halo universe, and that's something I appreciate. Prometheans have also arrived on Meridian, although their goals are not yet clear. They're attacking Meridian Station and giving the settlers a hard time, but Governor Sloan is skeptical of the Spartans. Overall, the colony planet is very skeptical of the UNSC. This disdain for the UNSC is a through line from other games, as we saw similar attitudes in Reach. Sloan reluctantly opens the bridge for the Spartans, so they can help his people en route to the city. Along the way, we're treated to some more visuals. Once again, Guardians is great at creating a sense of scale and awe, and its environments are rendered with this painterly feel that resembles concept art. It's really well done. Sloan allows the Spartans into the city after they rescue his people. Here we discover that Sloan is actually an AI and he's suffering from rampancy. It's the same deterioration that affects all AIs, and Cortana's affliction with it was the focus of Halo 4. I love this concept, and it makes perfect sense for the world. With how capable the AIs are, it makes sense that a colony would let themselves be run by one. But what happens when that AI starts to naturally deteriorate? Will it step down? Well, in Sloan's case, he wants to hold on to power as long as he can. It's a really compelling setup, and I think an entire game or movie could have been built from this premise. Unfortunately, this idea isn't developed much in Halo 5. There is just this small set of levels, and the focus of the story moves away quickly. There is a sighting of Blue Team at Apogee Station, so Osiris heads there. They come across a mine, and Locke asks for permission to enter. Sloan is argumentative, but eventually he grants them access. As they ride the elevator down, Osiris contemplates the situation. Things aren't adding up.
This place is huge. Why wouldn't Sloan report a find of this size? Mother hell.
To Knocker?
Just realized. Buck was saying Blue Team didn't fight Prometheans. Well, they didn't have to sweet-talk Sloan either. You think Sloan let them down here? Reckon it's a possibility.
Halo 5 continues to build the mystery around Cortana. What's she planning? If Chief is going along with her, then there is still the flicker of hope that she has good motives. They run into the Warden Eternal, who tries to stop them from going further. He claims to be Cortana's protector. This begins a boss fight, which is a fine encounter, for now at least. I'll get more into the Warden later on. Once the Warden is defeated, Osiris at last encounters Blue Team. What follows is one of the most maligned cutscenes in the game. For some context, Halo 5's marketing material pitched a big standoff between Chief and Locke. In-game, however, all we get is an anticlimactic scuffle between Chief and Locke, which amounts to a half-hearted draw. I don't despise this cutscene as much as I've seen others do, but I have some key problems with it. First, I feel like Locke is being fairly reasonable, asking Chief to come in or explain himself. Chief, on the other hand, is just a stone wall, refusing to cooperate or even talk with Locke. I get that Chief isn't exactly a bastion of communication, and he's more skeptical of the UNSC than ever, especially when it comes to Cortana, but still. It feels like he could have at least said something. His behavior just feels contrived here to create a battle between him and Locke. Speaking of contrived, why did the other Spartans just sit and watch as Chief and Locke fight? Why did they silently agree to watch a gladiator match? It feels like they would either be helping their leaders fight or fighting each other as well. You can criticize the choreography of the fight itself all you want, but this is the real standout point to me. The clash ends with Blue Team getting away and entering the Guardian, while Locke and his Spartans are forced to flee. Sloan issues evac orders in response to the Guardian activation. The Spartans suspect he's been allied with Cortana this whole time. Vale puts 2 and 2 together. The prior Forerunner attacks? The same thing is happening here on Meridian. The activation of the Guardian will result in the planet becoming a crater. Osiris races to exfil, fighting Prometheans along the way. After convincing Sloan to open the space elevator for them, Osiris confronts him about Cortana.
She gave me fair warning, true enough. I was allowed to help my people survive. A change is gonna come. For all of us, human and created alike. She's bringing a new dawn, and I intend to be part of it.
We're getting more pieces to the puzzle here. He believes in a new dawn she offers, one for humanity and created alike. What the created are can be deduced by Sloan. There's hope in his voice, and it's evident that this new dawn applies to him personally as well. It seems that the created are AIs like himself and Cortana. Her plan isn't entirely clear yet, but the consequences are. If she's able to activate another Guardian on a planet, then it's likely that the inhabitants will either be killed or rendered homeless as well. Team Osiris needs to stop her, with or without Blue Team. They discover that the Sangheli homeworld Sanghelios has a Guardian. They devise that they can use the Guardian to transport them to the same place that Chief's team went. Unfortunately, Sanghelios is in the midst of a civil war. Osiris' team doesn't let this stop them though, so they head to the elite homeworld. This marks a turning point in the story, and also a good breaking point to discuss combat. And man, there's a lot I want to get into. Halo 5 plays very differently to its predecessors, and this is mainly due to the new Spartan abilities. They're kind of like armor abilities from prior games, but they're always available. These are things like the thruster pack, ground pound, charge, hover, etc. They're woven directly into your base combat kit. For instance, you can hold melee while sprinting to charge, or hold melee in the air to ground pound. You can aim in the air to activate the hover stabilizer. Thrust is given its own dedicated button with a cooldown. The seamlessness of these new abilities is great. Very quickly, they become second nature. They feel very smooth and well integrated into your base kit, and they feel like a natural extension of your capabilities. They do give Halo 5 a very different feel than its predecessors. Halo's combat design has always been centered around what others have dubbed its combat triangle: your gun, melee, and grenade. There is a delicate balance struck between these abilities, and knowing when to use each one really drove the gameplay experience. It's one of those things that's hard to fully get across in words, but the focus on this combat triangle gave Halo a very unique flow. When playing Halo, you fall into a particular rhythm. The addition of all these new Spartan abilities somewhat upsets the combat triangle. With all these new abilities, it inherently changes that rhythm. This isn't bad necessarily, it's just different. And if Halo fans are coming to Halo for a particular gameplay feel, it makes sense why the changes are so controversial. In addition, at the time of Halo 5's release, advanced movement was the latest trend in shooters. This was the jetpack era of Call of Duty, along with the breakout of games like Titanfall. So these gameplay changes weren't viewed at the time as innovative, but rather derivative. Halo 5's take on advanced movement isn't everyone's cup of tea, but it's certainly mine. I'm super biased because I love advanced movement shooters. Titanfall 2 is my favorite multiplayer shooter of all time. I just love the feel of Halo 5's movement, and I think they did a great job of integrating the new abilities. I would say Halo 5 has my favorite movement system after Titanfall, and coming from a huge fan of these types of games, I consider that really high praise. There are other significant gameplay changes to Halo 5. The Promethean faction has had an overhaul from Halo 4. Halo 4 had 3 basic enemy units: the Knights, Dogs, and Drones. The Knights were the primary unit, but their abilities weren't conducive to serving in this role. The Knights teleported, and they often had short range and high damage weapons. So you were primarily fighting enemies that teleported around the arena. As a result, Halo 4's combat didn't really have a feeling of flow. It felt very disjointed when fighting the Prometheans. Halo 5 rectifies this by introducing a new soldier faction. The Knights are reserved for almost mini-boss encounters. The Prometheans, as a result, feel so much better to fight against. They feel more similar to the Covenant, while at the same time remaining distinct. So with the improved Promethean faction design and the new Spartan movement, you might think Halo 5 is a net improvement over its predecessor, right? Well, not quite. Halo 5's combat system has other mechanics that undercut its movement systems. This is why I wanted to spend so much time on the combat, because it sheds a light into the same fundamental issue that plagues this story. The combat system suffers from a lack of focus and direction. Halo 5 leans into squad mechanics. Unfortunately, the implementation and balance of these mechanics undercut the movement system. In Halo 5, you have a squad of AI teammates to fight with you, Osiris or Blue Team depending on who you're playing as. They have the ability to revive you, and you have the ability to revive them. These mechanics incentivize you to work together and play as a squad, and the game is tuned around this. I haven't crunched the numbers, but I felt a lot more squishy in this game than prior ones. This might not be caused by a numerical health difference, but it could instead be due to the Promethean's aggression and more precise weapons, but the effect is the same either way. I felt like I went down quicker in Halo 5. When you go into a down state, the AI teammates aren't super reliable at reviving you, which means it's often better to play near them so they can pick you up. This dissuades you from pushing farther ahead with your advanced movement and playing at a slower pace. If you ground slam a group of enemies far from your squad, chances are they can't get you back up. These issues really start to manifest when you increase the difficulty. For this retrospective, I played through the campaign on normal. Normal difficulty gives me a sense for the combat, while also leaving me enough mental bandwidth to focus on other elements of the game like story and environmental design. On normal difficulty, the game feels amazing. You can use all of your Spartan abilities effectively, and your AI teammates are generally more helpful than they are harmful. They revived me more than I had to revive them. Cranking the difficulty to legendary really exposes all the issues I've talked about. Because of the enemy's accuracy and damage, combined with the limitations of your AI teammates, you're entirely dissuaded from using many of your Spartan abilities. The hover and the ground pound both require you to be stationary in the air, and you get completely melted from enemies even attempting to use them. Your AI teammates seem to die instantly, and they get mowed down before they can revive you. Instead of instilling camaraderie, the mechanics create a sense of frustration over your squad mates. I know I'm not the best Halo player, and my complaint isn't about Legendary's difficulty. Not exactly. It's about how the balance around squad mechanics and making you more vulnerable entirely conflicts with the Spartan abilities. In a game like Doom, increasing the difficulty forces you to engage more with the mechanics. In order to win, you need to use glory kills more, you need to use tools like the freeze and flamethrower more, and you need to use your entire weapon arsenal. You don't use these mechanics less. In contrast with Halo 5, Legendary incentivizes you to engage less with its movement abilities and play it more like a passive cover shooter. It's this fundamental clash in design which makes Halo 5 feel like it's trying to be two different types of game. I think your perception of Halo 5's combat is largely based on what difficulty you play it on. I can see why someone who started on Legendary would come to hate this combat system. Meanwhile, on normal difficulty, I had a blast. So that's my big diversion on combat. I think it's important though, because it's a critical example of Halo 5's lack of focus and coherent vision. With all that said, let's move back to the story. The Guardian takes Blue Team to the mysterious Forerunner world named Genesis. This planet has a really unique visual design. There are these winding structures that look both stony but also tree-like. Overall, I find it pretty imaginative. They fight through Covenant that were also pulled through slip space with the Guardians. Blue Team encounters the Warden Eternal, the same guy that Osiris Team fought. He really takes the Eternal title seriously. The Warden is really protective of Cortana, and he says that she's changed. Soon enough, Blue Team gets to make that judgment for themselves. Finally, they establish contact with Cortana.
John, you made it! Oh my... I can't believe you're here.
Where are we?
I will say, given the amount of emphasis Halo 4 put on Chief and Cortana's relationship, their reunion feels super anticlimactic. Chief doesn't really even say he's glad to see that she's alive. On one hand, it makes sense. After everything he's been hearing about her from the Warden, and the damage the Guardians have already caused, it makes sense that he'd be a bit cagey about her. But still, this is Cortana we're talking about. As Blue Team talks more with her, the conversation grows more ominous despite her upbeat tone.
Cortana, why does the Warden think he needs to protect you from me?
There's so much to explain. It'll be easier when we're face to face.
Try me.
The cure for rampancy I've found means AIs can be immortal. That kind of lifespan allows for long-term planning, just like the Forerunners were capable of. AIs can assume the Forerunner's mantle of responsibility. And once there is peace, we can focus on poverty, hunger, illness. But Warden believes some will resist our help, and he's afraid you're one of them.
Sounds great. I don't get why anyone's expecting resistance.
The Didact made it clear the mantle of responsibility was an Imperial piece. Step out of line and suffer.
It won't be like that, John. I'll explain it better once we're together.
It's becoming more evident that Cortana is in fact the villain of this story. Even Chief is coming around to it. As their story progresses, I'll get more into this transformation. Another thing I want to talk about is the game's suspense. The sense of mystery that the game has built up pretty much entirely vanishes at this point. There are smaller reveals later, but that building suspense is gone. For all of that build-up, the mystery almost feels forgotten about. The game essentially establishes here that, yeah, Cortana's the bad guy, and then the storytelling changes gear. It moves away from the suspense. It's a bit of a bummer because I thought the mystery build-up was fairly well done, and it's sad that it feels like the mystery didn't capstone with a sense of payoff. There isn't that feeling of grand revelation, if that makes sense. Without payoff, the prior mystery feels somewhat aimless. They finally reach the Forerunner domain, and they enter to reach Cortana and get more answers. Meanwhile, Osiris meets with the Sangheli and prepares to enter their home world. Locke has conversations with Vale and Lasky.
So, you wrote a target dossier on the Arbiter when you were with Tony.
That was 6 years ago. What's your point?
You recommended assassinating him.
After we killed millions of our people.
So why didn't you?
Things changed.
Locke. Planet's deep in civil war. If this all goes sideways...
I understand, sir.
It's not my first mission that doesn't exist.
Good luck, Spartan.
In isolation, I like Locke. He's taciturn, but by the way he speaks and through his tone, it always feels like there's a lot he's pondering but leaving unsaid. I think he's fairly intriguing. However, when you stack him up against Chief, there are a lot of similarities. They're both big, quiet guys who have always had more behind their words than the words themselves. Chief's dynamic with Cortana is more compelling, so at times Locke feels like a watered-down version of Chief. The series already had a great dual protagonist setup with the Arbiter in Halo 2. The reason that worked so well is because the Arbiter was so markedly different from Chief. He had an entirely different worldview and philosophy, and I felt like his perspective added a whole new dynamic. Unfortunately, we don't get that with Locke. Chief is still the blank slate of the series in a lot of ways, so the game had an opportunity to take Locke in a different direction. Unfortunately, he's kind of a blank slate too. I wish the game had given him the space and time to differentiate more from Master Chief. Unfortunately, Halo 5 has so much going on, I just don't think it had the bandwidth to do so. Osiris reaches Sanghelios and heads after the Arbiter. I think it's so cool that we finally get to visit the elite homeworld in this game. Like I mentioned about Meridian before, I really appreciate how Halo 5 gives us a look at Halo's extended universe, giving us a glimpse into places discussed previously in the lore. I find the Covenant Civil War so interesting and I wanted to learn more. Similar to Governor Sloan and his rampancy, I think you could have created an entire game centered around this war. Unfortunately though, we only get a glimpse of it in Halo 5. There are too many other plot points spinning. This mission also sees the return of the Mantis, which I was happy about. The Mantis is one of my favorite vehicles in the game. Osiris reaches the Arbiter, and Locke has a tense exchange with him. Arbiter is skeptical of Locke and his past, namely when he volunteered to execute the Arbiter. That of course is understandable. However, I also appreciate some of the subtle character work here. Arbiter still speaks about the Master Chief with a level of respect that he doesn't afford the other humans. He is extra skeptical that Locke is hunting him. Cortana announces her presence, declaring that they'll never find her. With her reveal comes added urgency. She knows the Guardian is here too, and they need to beat her to it. Sunayan is the Covenant's final stronghold. The Arbiter will only move in on it when they're ready to commence the final battle. Meanwhile, Halsey has discovered a way to activate the Guardian. They need a constructor from one of the Forerunner Sentinels on the planet. Osiris' team heads there to retrieve it. During the journey, they fight a Kraken in an epic battle. I really like this segment as it reminds me of fighting the Scarabs throughout the classic series. They retrieve the constructor just in time for the Arbiter's forces to head to Sunayan. Before Locke deploys, Halsey stops him.
You know what I did to create the Spartans, all in the name of the greater good.
Doctor, we don't have time.
Cortana is built from a matrix of my own mind. The domain gives her incredible power.
I understand.
Spartan Locke! Stop her! But please, bring John home to me.
I like this conversation. Halsey tries to justify her actions, but Locke isn't interested in discussing it. As we saw with Locke previously when he talked with Buck about the Master Chief, when he's given an order, he follows through on it. He doesn't question the right or wrongness of it, and he doesn't care to hear Halsey's self-justifications. In her, we also see a concern for the Master Chief. Despite her coldness, she does in fact seem to have some level of genuine care for him. The Spartans reach the Covenant City, and they engage in the final battle of this war. Sunayan is such a cool setting. The bulbous buildings look very fitting for the Covenant, given the architecture of their ships, yet the setting still evokes a feeling of imagination. The buildings loom high amidst the backdrop of an ocean that stretches endlessly, illuminated by a sun heading to slumber. The sky is alight with activity, with Covenant Banshees and other aircraft dogfighting. It creates that large-scale epic feeling, like this war is being fought by more than just Osiris. As I've been talking about, Halo 5's art direction is amazing at creating a sense of wonder and scale. It's also cool to fight alongside the Arbiter. In Halo 3, he fought alongside us on Earth. Now we get to fight with him on his own world. It's a cool parallel. When the battle starts to wrap up, Osiris heads for the Guardian. Promethean forces attempt to stop him, and this culminates in yet another Warden Eternal fight. One of the common complaints about Halo 5 is its overuse of the Warden Eternal. You fight him a total of 7 times throughout the campaign, which is excessive. However, I think the bigger problem than the sheer repetition is how it reduces the Warden Eternal's threat. He tries to come across as this big, imposing threat, but how is he supposed to feel threatening after you've already beaten him 4 times? He starts to feel like an ineffectual joke, which then diminishes the threat of the Prometheans as a whole. After the Warden Eternal is defeated yet again, the Spartans activate the Guardian and reach Genesis. There's a pretty cool segment where the Spartans run down a Forerunner structure with the backdrop of the planet before you. The jumping mechanics slightly change, and every leap feels like a rappelled descent. When they touch down on solid ground, Locke contacts the Chief.
Chief, Dr. Halsey sent us. We're here to help you.
How the hell are you here?
Long story, sir. Cortana has been activating Forerunner.
Where? We're at the gateway.
With how closed off and hostile Chief can be, he can come across as a jerk in this game. Osiris gets help from a Forerunner monitor named the Exuberant Witness, and they head off to find Chief. They fight through the Forerunner defenses, which, surprise, ends in yet another Warden Eternal boss fight. At last, Osiris reaches Blue Team. However, this time, Osiris comes peacefully.
Chief, please, wait. Cortana.
She's dangerous. I know.
You don't have to do this alone. We're here to help you.
The important thing to note about this cutscene is that Chief has fully accepted that Cortana is a threat and needs to be dealt with. It feels like this change occurred off screen. During the last Blue Team mission, he still largely had hope that she could be brought home. Cortana arrives and whisks Blue Team away. She's granted them an audience. However, the Warden Eternal is still adamant on protecting her, so Blue Team has to fight through more Promethean forces. Along the way, Cortana attempts to talk with Chief, but he isn't having any of it.
It's so good to see you again, John. So good to see all of you back together as a family.
Psychological tactics. Saying my name. Playing nice.
What would you have me do?
Tell me the truth. How many people died when you called the Guardians here?
Excuse me?
You know, don't you? The exact body count.
Chief is now full bore against Cortana. It feels like such a pivot, and he doesn't have any internal debate about it. Why didn't we get more of this character development in-game? While Blue Team fights, the Warden Eternal and Cortana reveal more about the overarching plan.
Your species' ego led you to believe the task of reclamation would fall to you. Yet humanity were but the creators. The reclamation of the Forerunner Empire is the task of the created.
Essentially, AIs like Cortana, the created, are meant to ascend and claim the Forerunner Empire's power. They are to impose peace upon the galaxy, whether its denizens want that peace or not, and they're to use the Guardian and Promethean forces to do so. Through her and the Warden's conversation, she does seem to hold some reservation about hurting humanity or others, but it doesn't seem to be enough to stop her. Overall, Cortana's still pretty enthusiastic about the plan. It's such a weird character shift. In the prior Halo games, as far as I can recall, we never really saw an urge from Cortana to rule or hold power over anyone. The gap between that Cortana and the one in Halo 5 isn't ever bridged. The level ends with Blue Team fighting not 1, but 3 Warden Eternals. I already talked about how overused the Warden is, so I'm not going to beat that dead horse. At last, Chief and Cortana meet in person. He tries one last time to convince her to stand down and return home. His pleas predictably fall on deaf ears. Cortana paralyzes Blue Team, and she plans on imprisoning them until her work is done. Let's talk more about this overall plot, because it's perhaps the most criticized aspect of this game. Cortana's turn to the dark side is not well handled. Halo 4 was dedicated to Chief and Cortana's relationship. It aimed to form an emotional connection between the player and Cortana. Halo 5 takes this beloved character and makes her evil. It was a very risky idea, and it's one that I'm not overly a fan of, but I think there is a world in which it could have worked. It could have been compelling to see a story where Chief has to grapple with losing Cortana all over again in an even worse way. However, a story like that requires great care. Fundamentally, it requires time. The player needs to see the transformation of Cortana gradually, or at least naturally. They need to see her transition from the lovable friend in the prior games to power-hungry dictator. I think some of the seeds were there. The game could have leaned even more into Cortana's resentment for how AIs are treated, and really used that as the lever for her turn. The same lack of development goes for Chief. He, with the snap of his fingers, accepts that Cortana is a threat and needs to be dealt with. We don't really get to see him struggle with turning against his most beloved friend, even if she has gone evil. And that's the chief problem. Because we don't see any of this development on screen for either character, they come across as entirely different people than the ones players fell in love with throughout the franchise. And that comes across as a betrayal. It's not just a writing quality issue. Unfortunately, the issue is more fundamental than that. A story with this much character change deserved an entire game, but instead Chief and Cortana are given 3 out of 15 missions in the campaign. There is just no way to build up these character changes believably in the space of 3 campaign missions. There's no way when the game dedicates so little time or attention to this plot that it doesn't come across as feeling artificial and rushed. Here we see another example of Halo 5's ambition clashing with a lack of focus. The plot here is incredibly daring, but the game lacks the focus required to pull it off. The game is pulled away to explore other plots like Osiris, the Covenant Civil War, settlement life on Meridian, and so on. Like I talked about with the gameplay, the lack of focus makes these elements compete with each other, so none of them can thrive. With Blue Team down, it's up to Osiris' team to stop Cortana. As they advance, they see the sheer number of Guardians that Cortana has at her disposal. After the destruction of Meridian from a lone Guardian, this vision gives us a powerful glimpse at the stakes of this fight. Again, Halo 5's environments do a great job of further telling the story. During the fight, Cortana taunts Osiris. She digs into their pasts and makes barbs to mess with them.
Olympia Vale, the little genius girl who only wanted Daddy to love
That's
her.
Spartan Vale. And if you're reading my psych eval, you know it takes more than my father to get to me.
And yet...
This feels petty and cruel-hearted for her, but I already spoke enough about her character transition. More importantly, none of these jabs really resonated with me as the player, because I still didn't feel like I knew the members of Osiris. Cortana may as well have been taunting strangers. There are a few moments throughout the game dedicated to building the characters of Osiris, but they are too little and too infrequent. As I've been talking about, Guardians is pulled in so many directions, and it just doesn't have the bandwidth to establish Osiris effectively. Osiris fights on, and they help the exuberant witness wrench control of the cryptum away from Cortana. However, she still gets away with her Guardian, and this won't stop her from enacting her plan. Osiris frees Blue Team, but they can't move fast enough as Cortana continues her work. She and the other AI shut down everything from Earth to the other colonies. Cortana finds the Infinity, but Lasky is quick on his feet, and the vessel escapes into slip space as her Guardian unleashes an energy blast, which appears to shut down Earth's power. The Infinity continues to run away, deciding to fight another day. The game ends with the final scene of Chief and Locke reuniting with Halsey on Sang Helios.
It took you long enough?
The campaign, at least to me, ends on an abrupt note. There's not really any payoff to speak of, no final encounter with Chief and Cortana, and no closure between Chief and Locke, or anything of the sort. It's clear that Halo 5 is setting up a sequel where Chief, the Arbiter, and the UNSC team up to stop Cortana, who is now actively a galactic-level threat. I've talked a lot about this game's pros and cons, so I want to pull everything together. Halo 5 Guardians is a campaign with undeniable ambition. It's a game that radically changes the series' classic gameplay format, and it aims to deliver a story not only wider in scope, but a story so daring that it tries to subvert perhaps the most loved relationship in the series, that between Chief and Cortana. Unfortunately, Halo 5 lacks one key thing to make this ambition work: focus. Halo 5 is an unfocused game that doesn't know what game it wants to play as or what story it wants to tell. Halo 5 merges the mechanics of a movement shooter with a squad-based tactical shooter, and they fight against each other. The story aims to develop two squads simultaneously, with neither getting enough spotlight to truly shine. The story fosters a sense of mystery, then that feeling of suspense dissipates without adequate payoff. The story darts from UNSC colonies to Sang Heli civil wars, yet it fails to give enough care and respect to what should be its central plot, that of Cortana's transformation and Chief's handling of it. Halo 5 is a game with sparks of brilliance. The environmental design infuses the world with such vibrancy and a sense of movement, and this pairs well with Halo 5's wider depiction of the universe. There's true imagination and creativity with some of the plot points, such as Sloan, an AI with rampancy running a human colony. The Spartan abilities may not be to everyone's taste, but I think in isolation, they're implemented expertly. Halo 5 makes a lot of improvements from Halo 4. For instance, there have been big improvements to the Promethean faction, which is significant considering how much time we spend fighting them. However, Halo 5 doesn't feel like a step forward. It feels like a step sideways at best. Halo 4 had such a focus on Chief and Cortana, and their sidelining makes Halo 5 feel less like a direct sequel and more like a spin-off. It doesn't feel like Halo 5 is the natural progression of the story, if that makes sense. It doesn't take the baton forward, but instead in an entirely different direction. I keep going back and forth on the pros and cons, and I think that gets to my bigger point. When people talk so negatively about Halo 5, it does bum me out a bit, because I do see the potential in a lot of the game's elements. Guardians is a game with ideas. However, nonetheless, the negativity towards the game is perfectly understandable. Halo 5 shows that ideas by themselves aren't enough. Ideas need to be nurtured in order to flourish. Otherwise, no matter how much potential they have, they will fail to resonate with players. My favorite level in the entire Halo series is Combat Evolved's second mission, simply titled Halo. The Master Chief, forced to flee from the Pillar of Autumn, emerges from an escape pod and finds himself on a mysterious ringed world. This level instills a sense of adventure better than any other level I can think of, and I mean across games in general. The Pacific Northwest-inspired forest, backdropped by a star-flooded sky, fills me with a sense of wanderlust and awe, even to this day. When I think of Halo, this level is the very first thing that pops into my mind. It encapsulates the core appeal of the franchise to me. So naturally, when I heard that the upcoming Halo Infinite's entire campaign was inspired by this level, I was incredibly excited by the prospect. The adventure that Halo offers, expanded into an entire game, is a premise with, dare I say, infinite potential. However, I, like many others, also had a lot of caution going into Halo Infinite. The reception of Halo 4's campaign was controversial, and Halo 5 was downright maligned. Halo Infinite, for many fans, would be 343 Industries' last chance. 3 strikes and you're out. Still, there was hope surrounding Halo Infinite's launch. The core premise of the campaign, as I said, seems strong. Even more importantly, the return to a more classic art style directly addressed one of longtime fans' most vocal criticisms. However, Halo Infinite had a difficult task. The campaign had to follow up the events of Halo 5, the ending of which saw Cortana, one of the series' most beloved characters, leading a galactic-level threat against humanity. How can the studio take such a hated plot thread and weave a compelling narrative from it? Or do they even have to continue it at all? Could this plot just be sidestepped instead? Halo Infinite's story treads the difficult line between reboot and true sequel, and we'll see how that pans out. After 2 games of finding their footing, does 343 finally manage to nail their third try? Well, we're going to explore that in this retrospective. We're going to dive into Halo Infinite's storytelling, its open world design, and its gameplay. After years to let the dust settle, we're going to see how Halo Infinite stacks up. So grab your helmets one last time, Spartans, as we journey to Zeta Halo. But first, we find ourselves once again within the UNSC Infinity. At the beginning of Halo Infinite, the UNSC Infinity finds itself once again in distress. However, the threat at hand isn't Cortana with her Guardians. Instead, the supercarrier is being attacked by the Banished, a faction of mercenaries from the spin-off Halo Wars 2. The player is dropped into the middle of the fight, spectating with little context of what led up to this conflict. This in media res opening is very much intentional. The narrative crafts a mystery around the past. What is clear, however, is that the UNSC is losing. That includes our Master Chief, a man so formidable that the Covenant created a nickname for him, the Demon. Though this day, even the Chief is laid low. Atriox, the leader of the Banished, beats him down as handily as the Chief would take down a grunt. The cinematography in this opening is excellent. The camera is always moving, which conveys the kineticness of the action as well as a sense of anxiety. The Chief, in pretty much all of his encounters, is portrayed as physically superior. That serious convention is inverted here, with the Chief being portrayed as weak and vulnerable. Through contrast, it establishes the raw power that Atriox possesses, and thus the threat he presents. So this opening creates 2 key narrative expectations. First, that this mystery about the past will be explored. Second, that Chief, having been laid low, will have a chance to prove his strength again against Atriox. After all, why do you show a hero beaten so early in the story? To show them rise above it. So this opening creates 2 key narrative expectations. Atriox casts Chief off of the Infinity, and he's left adrift in space. The narrative switches to the perspective of a pilot. He's cut off from a fractured UNSC. The growth of his hair spells the passage of time. He's left with only a hologram of his family to keep him company. The storytelling here is straightforward and concise, but it's effective. You understand the pilot's situation and feel bad for him. At long last, he encounters a friendly signal. He stumbles across none other than the Master Chief. The pilot powers up Chief's armor to revive him, and he explains their current predicament.
We lost everything. There's nothing left for us here.
Something has destroyed a segment of the ring, something powerful. The narrative is adding to the mystery surrounding Zeta Halo. Their ship is pulled into a stasis beam by a banished warship. The pilot wants to run, while the Chief wants to take the battle to the enemy.
We need to run!
I need a weapon.
Weapon? This is all I've got.
It's enough.
This is such a good line, and it succinctly encapsulates who the Master Chief is. He's a man who will always fight on, no matter the odds. Chief makes his way to the warship. This is another excellent cutscene with great cinematography. The best moment is when Chief has a moment of hesitation when he takes the gun of a fallen soldier. This subtle moment manages to convey a sense of true sorrow. One thing I've always appreciated about 343's campaigns is how much effort they put into characterizing the Chief through his body language. When Chief reaches the warship, the battle begins. The opening level in Halo Infinite manages to be both familiar and unfamiliar. It's common for Halo campaigns to open on a ship, so it feels homey in a way. At the same time though, we're on an enemy ship instead of a UNSC ship. It creates an isolated, lonely feeling, which is apt for the story. Chief reaches the command station, and he witnesses a rallying speech from Escharum, who's Atriox's lieutenant. He reveals a startling development. Atriox, the formidable baddie we were destined to have a rematch with, seems to have already died. How did such a formidable warrior go down? It seems linked to the ring somehow. The intrigue around Zeta Halo yet again increases. Chief can't deactivate the stasis beam, so he decides to scuttle the ship instead. This draws Escherum's attention.
Humans call you their savior. Covenant, demon, the banished, prey.
Even if Atriox is dead, Escharum seems like more than an adequate replacement. He comes across as imposing. When the ship goes critical, Chief makes a frantic escape back to the pilot. The sequence where Chief platforms across the ship's crumbling machinery is awesome. It's both cinematic and fun mechanically. It showcases the potential of Chief's new grappling hook, especially in conjunction with scripted scenes. This first level overall is a strong start to the game. The plot has plenty of narrative hooks for the player, and the mission is tense with memorable moments, with the cream of the crop being this escape segment. I want to point out for reference later how the starting level is more of a traditional linear Halo mission. Chief returns to the ship, and he reckons with the deaths of pretty much all the UNSC crewmen. As always, he doesn't say much, but his body language speaks for him. Meanwhile, the Banished hold their own meeting. Escharum is actually happy that Chief is alive.
Atriox assured us of his death. Are you not angered? No. I feel invigorated. You promised us revenge, superiority, renewal. He threatens everything. Do you question my leadership?
Invigorated is an interesting word choice here. It means to revitalize, which means there's a state you have to revitalize from. I'll talk more about this later, so leave this as an earmark. Tremonius, one of his warlords, is troubled by this enthusiasm, and he doubts Escharum. I appreciate the infighting between the Banished here. This depiction of the faction as having opposing viewpoints and conflicts makes them far more interesting than a monolithic force. I also appreciate how the story avoids the trope of the evil leader killing the disobeying henchmen. Escharum spares Tremonius so he can have his revenge. Here we learn of his immediate goal of restoring the ring. During Escharum's speech, he mentions not bowing to anyone. Notably, he mentions a mysterious her, while their projector shows a strange object. This is some good narrative foreshadowing for the story's secondary antagonist. The Blade Master 2 builds anticipation. This guy just looks so cool and menacing, and you know that he and Chief are going to brawl it out at some point. The Banished aren't the only divided force. The Master Chief wants to investigate Zeta Halo, while the pilot would prefer to flee while they still can.
We need to go home.
Plot the waypoint.
Requesting manual flight control override.
Do it.
All pilot engaged.
Wait, what? Are you kidding me? Why would we go down there?
The pilot is a bit whiny here, but his perspective is understandable. At this point, I too would be a doubter and just want to go home. Chief lands within a mysterious Forerunner structure on Zeta Halo, and the game's second mission begins. Like the first, this level mixes both the familiar and unfamiliar. We've explored so many Forerunner structures throughout the series, and it feels right to do so again. However, the buildup of Zeta Halo thus far indicates that this ring holds different, and maybe even darker secrets than what we've seen in the past.
What are those things? This is Forerunner, right? I've heard the stories, but man, this is crazier than I imagined.
The suspense surrounding this ring continues to build. Chief is after a weapon, and after some more searching he finds it. But this weapon isn't a big gun or explosive. Rather, it's an AI. A disarming one at that.
It's been 6 months. Where have you been?
What happened? Where is Cortana?
The rogue AI known as Cortana is gone. She's been deleted.
There's a lot to unpack here. Given the ending of Halo 5, the audience has been waiting with bated breath for Cortana's appearance. Hearing that she's already dead is quite the shock. Of course, the telling of her story isn't over. Not yet. This weapon shares an uncanny resemblance to Cortana, which makes sense, given her directive to imitate Cortana to infiltrate the installation. Despite the weapon's behavior being just as human as Cortana, Chief refuses to call her by anything other than the weapon. This shows the impact that Cortana has had on him. After such a thorough betrayal, he refuses to acknowledge that this AI is anything beyond the risk it was designed to execute. Yet Chief refuses to delete her. Something stopped her deletion protocol, and he wants to find out what. He loads the weapon into his armor. As they continue up the lift, Chief hears echoes of Cortana's voice. This is a reiteration that there's more to Cortana and her apparent demise that warrants exploration. In fact, as Chief continues through the installation, he hears Cortana's words from all the way back in Halo 4.
They'll pair you with another AI. They'll pair you with another AI. Maybe even another Cortana model if Halsey lets them.
There's a sadness in seeing Cortana's words proven right. Indeed, Chief was paired with another AI. Chief, from his refusal to call the weapon by any other name, clearly does not see her as a replacement for Cortana. When the weapon explains the purpose of the strange containers we've seen in the installation, Chief regards her with hostility and suspicion, wondering where she got her information.
What are these things?
Genetic repositories, Forerunner storage vessels, Silexes.
How do you know this?
They continue their ascent, and one lift stands between them and the ring's surface. Unfortunately, Tremonius from the earlier cutscene arrives to eliminate the legendary Master Chief. Halo Infinite sees the return of boss fights, a mechanic that hasn't been seen since Halo 2, unless you count the Wardens from 5. I'll delve more into gameplay later, but suffice it to say, this encounter is a pretty solid boss fight. Tremonius essentially fights like a beefed up jetpack banished, and it feels like an adequate challenge since the player is still new to the game. After the fall of Tremonius, Eshtram makes his introduction to Chief. This guy's the trash-talking king, as we'll see soon enough. At the conclusion of his speech, the world opens to Chief, both literally and figuratively. This moment serves as Infinite's stepping out moment, akin to stepping out of a vault in Fallout or the cave in Skyrim. The ring in all of its glory before us promises both adventure and discovery. Chief clears an LZ for the pilot, and the weapon introduces the map and a few of the activities Chief can get up to, along with the next main mission. After this, the weapon asks Chief why Cortana had to be deleted, but Chief refuses to tell her. Yet again, we see the lack of trust that the Master Chief has for this new AI. The Master Chief is officially let loose on the ring. The open world is Halo Infinite's big selling point, and it's the differentiator from its predecessors. So how effective is the open world? Does it live up to the promise and discovery that the original Halo level offered all of those years ago? The open world starts out really promising. Zeta Halo is home to some incredible vistas. There's just something about watching a sunset on the ring and seeing the stars peek out from behind the fading sky that captures a feeling of awe. Likewise, peering down from the edge of the ring and seeing the endlessness of space stretch out before you is a sight that truly only Halo with its ring world can provide. In these passing moments, Halo Infinite feels like the significant step forward that Halo Infinite sold itself as. The world is littered with Ubisoft-style destinations for you to check off a list. Activities such as liberating forward operating bases, eliminating high-value targets, taking over Banus outposts, and so on are the bulk of what you'll be doing on Halo's open world. These activities on their own actually offer a lot of fun. There isn't much variation between them, but the strength of Halo Infinite's gameplay sandbox is enough to counteract the sameness. I'll delve more into the gameplay sandbox later. For now though, I'll say it's strong enough to make encounters across the activities feel genuinely different. The amount of fun you can have is truly only limited by your creativity. You can take on a base alone with a sniper, which creates an entirely different experience than rolling in with Marines armed with rocket launchers. Because of the expansive sandbox, these relatively mundane activities become more than the sum of their parts, offering a welcome way to experience more of the game's combat systems beyond the campaign. Some of the activities, such as the Banished Outposts, also have a decent amount of production value and can feel pretty cinematic at times. On a different vein, the high-value targets offer unique weapons as rewards, which can make them fun to chase down. There is fun to be had here, certainly. Over time, however, Halo Infinite's world begins to lose its luster. The most glaring issue is the lack of environmental variety. The environments fall into two categories: Pacific Northwest Forest and Forerunner Structure. Within these two biomes, there's almost no variation. Once you've seen one forward operating base, you've pretty much seen them all. Exploring the ring starts as an exciting prospect, but the magic quickly disappears when you realize there's nothing to explore. The ring doesn't offer any secrets or unique experiences that genuinely feel worth going out of your way for. Let's take something like Elden Ring as a counterpoint. I won't give away any spoilers by delving into specifics, but in Elden Ring, I would genuinely stumble across sites and areas that I hadn't even imagined existing by finding a mysterious lift or cavern entrance. Halo rings have always been so fascinating and alien, and it feels like the game could have taken much more creative liberty with this ring. The rings in Halo, from Combat Evolved to Halo 2 and onward, have always instilled a sense of mystery and wonder. Halo Infinite's ring quickly feels like a known quantity, and the open world actually ends up dampening Zeta Halo's intrigue rather than adding to it. That overall is the biggest shame to me. Furthermore, the investment in Halo Infinite's open world seems to have hampered the design of the main missions. As we'll get further into, almost every one of Halo Infinite's following main missions takes place in a Forerunner structure, which becomes very monotonous. Halo Infinite's levels lack the wow factor of New Alexandria, The Storm, or so many other missions I could mention. The escape sequence I mentioned in Halo Infinite's opening level was great, but set pieces like that only reappear near the game's end, and they're even more limited in scope. Halo Infinite's open world succeeds at being a fun sandbox. If you're looking for fun combat encounters and just a way to squeeze a bit more time out of the game, I think it does an adequate job. However, I think on the storytelling and overall immersive experience front, Zeta Halo falls well short of the potential contained in the original Halo level. There isn't anything about Zeta Halo's open world that will stick with you long after the credits roll, except for perhaps the vistas I mentioned. With that, we'll dive back into the story of Infinite. The Master Chief learns of a UNSC distress signal, and he discovers that it's coming from a structure called the Tower. It's a banished stronghold, and as the Chief fights through his defenders, their leader Choklock addresses Chief. As Chief and the weapon break through the lockdown, they discover that this place is an interrogation facility. The prospect for UNSC troops here isn't good. Indeed, they discover the source of the signal, armor forcibly removed from a Spartan. Choklock, as it turns out, is using the signal as a lure for the Chief. This unfortunate discovery, at least, also grants Chief the threat sensor, which will be very useful in the upcoming battle. Choklock is another decent boss fight. He's an elite with an energy sword who loves cloaking, which makes him the perfect enemy to use our new threat sensor against. Like Tremonius, he feels like a tutorial boss to teach you about the equipment rather than serving as a true test of your mettle, which is okay at this stage in the game. They find the imprisoned Spartan Griffin, but it's too late for him. With his dying breaths, he tells Chief about a place called the Conservatory, which is contained in a dig site that he was investigating before being captured. With Griffin's death, Chief takes his charge in investigating the dig site. After the Spartan's death, Chief is unresponsive to the pilot and weapon for a while. As I mentioned, the game expresses Chief's character through his body language and often what he doesn't say, rather than what he says. At the excavation site, there's a giant laser drill that Chief must deactivate before accessing the conservatory. Naturally, banished forces attempt to stop him, with the boss Bassus standing as the final obstacle. He's a little more than a brute with a gravity hammer, but I really like this guy nonetheless. He can lunge at you from far distances and close the gap quickly, which forces you to use your grappling hook wisely in order to survive. It's just enough of a challenge and difference in mechanics to feel satisfying and refreshing. Before heading into the conservatory, the weapon observes that the Forerunner architecture has been somehow improved by some unknown entity. She also warns that the conservatory contains a bunch of banished. It is a bit crazy to blast a giant laser beam into a cavern filled with your buddies, but maybe the banished know something about construction that I don't. Chief banters with the weapon during this exchange.
Are you scared?
No. You?
Of course not. I've got you to keep me alive. Oh, and 63 millimeters of titanium alloy wrapped around our neural interface. I'll be fine.
Good to know.
Here we start seeing the slightest change in his attitude towards the weapon. He isn't quite as cold as earlier. Within the conservatory, they encounter the monitor of the installation, Despondent Pyre. The monitor seems to be losing control as it's attacked by strange new flying creatures. As Chief chases down Despondent Pyre, he overhears a conversation between the monitor and some other being. Judging by the Despondent Pyre's pleas for the entity to stop, we can gather this other being is the leader of the creatures. Chief and the weapon access a terminal, and they uncover a conversation between Cortana and Despondent Pyre, as Cortana too demands access to the ring's secrets. This is our first encounter with Cortana, although it's just a remnant of her. Whatever's in the ring, Cortana knows it's worse than the Flood. Considering the Flood was the defining threat in the original Halo trilogy, this secret is gearing up to be something massive. In this scene, the story is layering on even more suspense, creating even more build-up for the ring's secrets. They fight more of the flying creatures, which Chief and the weapon settle on calling skimmers. Here there's even more banter between the two. Slowly, the story continues establishing a connection between Chief and his new AI. When they breach the heart of the conservatory, they finally come across this strange entity, a being known as the Harbinger. Whatever she is, she's not a Forerunner.
The Forerunner's lies are at an end. I am the Harbinger of the truth. The Endless will be found. They will ascend.
Note that this is the same creature Eshram had in his projector. This Harbinger is allied with the Banished. Whatever their goals are, they can't bode well. Little more at this moment is known about the Harbinger. Chief knows that Cortana and the fallen Despondent Pyre viewed her as an existential threat, and that's enough for Chief. Stopping her is another item added to his to-do list. She escapes, and a massive spire in the distance activates. This spire quickly becomes the Chief's next investigation. Inside, a sub-monitor named Adjutant Resolution greets them. He escorts his guests through the spire, bringing them to the observation platform. The purpose of this spire is revealed. It's part of a Reformation effort to rebuild the ring. Chief abruptly puts a kibosh on that plan. The Banished and the Harbinger have control of the ring. There's no way he'll let them have such a powerful weapon operational. Naturally, the sub-monitor isn't a big fan of them disrupting his directive, and thus a boss fight commences. It's a pretty basic fight. You just shoot the glowy bits and then shoot its exposed core. It's certainly not memorable, but it's not bad either. After the monitor's defeat, they learn that more spires have emerged throughout the ring. They're not active yet, they're waiting on an activation sequence.
They appear to be waiting for an initialization sequence. Something is flooding the network trying to start it, but there's resistance.
Why?
The protocol that triggered all this wasn't exactly correct. Of course, I can find the source of the attack. I just need to...
Wait. Is it safe?
Come on, it's me.
We see some more character work with Chief here. In spite of his suspicion of the weapon, he nonetheless asks her if the operation is safe. You could say he's just concerned with the mission, sure, but I hear some genuine concern leak through his voice. In spite of himself, he's starting to become protective of an AI that was originally designed to terminate. The weapon deactivates the spire, but unfortunately it brings the structure crumbling down. The pilot saves them, but he's not too jolly about the whole situation. His mood only deteriorates as their Pelican is down by Banished AA guns.
I can't stand this! Who you are?
Breathe.
No! You don't get to tell me what to do. You don't get to tell me anything! We're...
At this point in the story, the pilot starts getting on my nerves, and I lose the small amount of empathy I had for him. He's just this constant negative Nancy, always doubting the chief and whining. Intellectually, I understand his perspective. His attitude is realistic to a certain extent. He's a guy who's been isolated in space for months, and now he's in over his head with the stoic warrior man and his strange AI. I get being negative about his prospects and preferring to run rather than fight for the ring. However, having a character constantly complaining and constantly doubting the main character even when he proves himself over and over is still annoying to watch. It wears you down very quickly. Depicting a character constantly this way is just not a good way to get an audience to empathize with him. Chief heads out to take out the 3 AA guns in the area, which are preventing the Pelican from taking off. When he deactivates each one, he receives a transmission from Escharum. The war chief gives long-winded speeches. While the speeches themselves aren't super long, but the war chief talks so slowly that it feels that way. As I said earlier, Escharum is the trash-talking king, and he spends so much of his time taunting Chief and gearing him up for their incredible confrontation. There's some interesting content in these speeches. Escharum says that this will be his last fight, which is another indicator that he's either unwell or just very old. He also mentions his Spartan killers, who he says are hunting Chief. I just think Infinite overuses the story mechanism a bit. Standing idly while a character yaps at you over and over isn't super engaging, even if the character has interesting details to share. Thankfully, the last AA gun doesn't feature another speech. Chief heads back to the Pelican, where he learns that 2 of Escharam's Spartan killers have been deployed. Chief must fight against Tovaris and Hyperius to protect the pilot. Tovaris has a jetpack and a scrap cannon, while Hyperius commands the ground in his chopper. This is one of the most interesting boss fights in the game, and it's one of my favorites. The 2 bosses complement each other well. Hyperius makes the ground unsafe to be on for long, while Tovaris punishes you on the high ground. The combo results in you constantly having to be on the move as you fight. It's another example of how Halo Infinite's inclusion of bosses can produce a fight that feels genuinely unique and refreshing. Afterwards, Chief finds the pilot who, surprise surprise, is in a bad mood. At first, this encounter starts with the pilot criticizing the Chief yet again, before it turns into something else.
You should leave me here with the rest of the garbage.
We all fail. We all make mistakes. It's what makes us human.
I'm sorry, Chief, but how have you ever failed?
I should have protected Cortana. Stopped everything from going wrong. I failed her. I will not fail you.
This scene reveals that there's a bit more depth to the pilot than it initially seemed. He's not merely a survivor that wants to get back to his family. He's a man filled with self-hatred and doubt, and a lot of that doubt for himself has been projected onto the Chief. This scene also humanizes the Chief, and it's amongst one of the game's best scenes with him. We see that he has profound regret over Cortana, and he sees her downfall as entirely his fault. Also, despite how cold and aloof the Master Chief can be, he nonetheless has the sense to tell when a fellow human needs comfort, and he provides it to the pilot. From here on out, the pilot becomes much more bearable. He stops doubting Chief, and he starts working with him. Escharum reckons with the loss of his Spartan killers. He and the Harbinger scheme, and they assess that the Spire controlling the Reformation must be protected. Their relationship is tense and filled with mistrust.
The scent grows stronger. Save your strength. I need something of you, old friend. Anything.
This is another example of the Banished characterization that I really appreciate. The game shows the strong relationship between Escharum and Jaga. We see contrast in the Banished. There is conflict and mistrust in their forces, yet there are also deep bonds of brotherhood holding it all together, such as between Escharum and Jaga. You get a picture of what the Banished as a faction is like through the small scenes we get of them throughout the game. This storytelling reminds me of Halo 2's brilliant world building and its scenes with the Covenant, and that comparison is high praise in my eyes. Chief and his allies head to the Command Spire. The weapon asks about what the Chief told the pilot earlier about letting Cortana down. He recounts the events leading to the loss of the Infinity, and the weapon hones in on the Chief's underlying motivation.
Do you want to know who killed her? You need to know. She was important to you. Very important.
This is some more solid character work. we learn that the Chief's stake in investigating Zeta Halo goes deeper than merely another mission. Despite everything Cortana has done, Chief still cares about her. When they reach the Spire, the weapon learns that she cannot reconstruct the rest of the sequence. Chief must access beacons across the ring to gather enough data to reconstruct the sequence. This is my least favorite mission in the game, because it's essentially padding. The story takes a pause, as Chief must traverse the ring to access each beacon. The sequence is the last mission before the point of no return in the story, so the purpose of this mission presumably is to encourage the player to engage with the open world one last time. As you're traveling to a beacon, might as well clear out a forward operating base along the way, right? Unfortunately, I don't think this diversion is worth the cost. This mission really kills the momentum that the story has been building up until this point. But since there's a big story pause here, it's the perfect time to talk about something more positive: combat. I've touched on the combat a little bit throughout the video, but there's still so much more to say. Halo Infinite's movement is just about perfect. It finds a middle ground between the advanced movement of Halo 5 and the more grounded sensibilities of older installments. Quality of life movement changes, such as the mantle and slide, are retained, while the more bombastic abilities like the Spartan Charge and Slam have been retired. Thrust returns, but it's an equipment item rather than a base ability, and we'll touch more on that one later. The gap between sprint and base movement speed has been narrowed. In fact, sprinting is only a little bit faster. As a result, sprint is a tool utilized for a quick boost of speed, often to power a slide or other movement, while not feeling like a constant necessity. All in all, Halo Infinite's movement feels like an evolution of the classic titles, while staying more truthful to them than Halo 4 and 5's changes. The weapon sandbox in Infinite sees an overhaul, perhaps the biggest in the entire series. Instead of merely expanding on the options offered in Halo 4 and 5, Infinite returns to the drawing board, culling many of the weapons and introducing a boatload of entirely new ones. As a result, the sandbox feels both refreshing while also purpose-built. In Halo 4 and 5, the new weapons often felt like they shared the same identity and purpose as older weapons. For instance, the assault rifle, the suppressor, and the storm rifle all occupied the fully automatic close-range rifle spot. In Halo Infinite, each weapon has a distinct identity and purpose. The Mangler and the Sidekick might both be pistols. However, you wouldn't mistake their purposes. The heavy firing and heavy recoil of the Mangler, along with it firing a projectile instead of a hit scan, give it an entirely different role in the sandbox. It's meant to be a close to mid-range precision weapon. Meanwhile, the rapid fire rate but low damage of the Sidekick give it an even closer range, more spammy identity. Even more critically, all these new additions feel amazing to use. The shock rifle, one of my favorite additions, is super satisfying to land a cluster of headshots with, and the reload has a kinetic feel which just tickles my brain. Landing a headshot with the skewer is perhaps one of the most gratifying feelings ever. I could go on and on about the new additions, and how creative many of them are, from the rebounding heatwave and cinder shot to the burning pools of plasma from the Ravager. No matter what weapon I picked up, for the most part, I was excited to use it, and that is a huge compliment. When you pair the amazing weapon handling with the satisfying base movement, Halo Infinite's combat really starts to sing. One of Infinite's most underrated new addition is ammo boxes. Each weapon has a distinct ammo type, such as kinetic, plasma, hardlight, and so on. Ammo boxes throughout the levels have one of these specific types, so they can only refill certain weapons. This addition fixes one of my issues with all prior games. In prior campaigns, you would often start with UNSC weapons, but you can only use them for a fight or two before having to pick up enemy weapons. Since UNSC weapons can be sparse, oftentimes I would end up using Covenant or Promethean weapons more than I would like. Halo has always been about using your resources wisely and scavenging from the battlefield, but it feels like that could come at the cost of not using UNSC weapons. Of course, Halo 4 is the flagship example of this problem. The ammo boxes mean that, even if I'm in a banish-only area, I can use my UNSC assault rifle or pistol a lot longer. These boxes are single-use, and they're situated sparsely enough that scavenging is still a vital part of the experience. Sometimes you will have to swap over to that plasma pistol on the ground. It's just not quite as often. More so, the use of different ammo boxes is clever because it allows the developers to cater a zone for specific weapons. If you have to shoot down enemy aircraft, there will be explosive boxes for you. Then after the encounter, you're not able to just replenish your launcher at every box in sight. In a nutshell, I guess, the ammo boxes give you a bit more control over your loadouts while not losing the sense of scarcity that Halo has always created. Overall, as I said, I think it's a really great addition. The other big aspect of the sandbox is Chief's equipment. The star of the show, as seen in all the game's promotional materials, is Chief's grapple shot. He receives this tool right at the very beginning of the game, and it feels as core to his kit as grenades. Grappling hooks have become a trend in games in recent years. It seems like every game and its grandmother has introduced grappling hooks. However, I don't think that should diminish the accomplishment of Infinite's grappling hook. I would say it's perhaps the best grappling hook in a single player game due to its utility. The grappling hook in Infinite doesn't merely just carry Chief from point A to point B. It has a heap of other uses, from grabbing plasma coils to stray weapons on the ground, to stunning enemies and mounting vehicles. It feels like this grappling hook opens the door for endless creativity and cinematic moments. The other equipment has its uses too, from flushing enemies out with the threat sensor to protecting yourself with the drop wall. There are upgrades for each equipment type, and these upgrades are genuinely game-changing. A 40% recharge decrease on the grapple shot may just be a numbers tweak, but it means the difference between having another grapple shot online before you even land back on the ground. There are other more unique upgrades, such as stunning enemies with the grapple shot, or the thrusters giving Chief a temporary cloak. So upgrades make a big difference, but Chief doesn't feel underpowered at the beginning of the game without them. This upgrade system finds the right balance between Chief feeling as competent as ever, while also providing real benefits to exploring the open world, and these upgrades are littered throughout. Chief has all these flashy tools, but how do his enemies stack up in comparison? Fortunately, they rise to the occasion. Infinite only has one main enemy faction, the Banished. Despite this, they feel like one big mega faction due to the variety in their forces. In prior Halo titles, the Covenant Chief fought usually only consisted of the elites or the brutes. In the Banished, however, both of these sub-factions are within their ranks. Each sub-faction, be it elites, brutes, grunts, or jackals, is composed of multiple units. For instance, amongst the brutes, there are the traditional brute majors that use conventional weaponry. However, there are also brute captains, which often leverage jetpacks, which creates a more vertical field of battles. Brute snipers create a threat from long ranges, while berserkers ruthlessly charge the Chief and force him to leverage his new movement. Because the units offer distinct challenges in combat, the mixing and matching of them result in combat encounters feeling genuinely unique. When you multiply this variety across the other enemies in the game, Halo Infinite's sandbox begins to feel limitless. Most importantly, the enemies are fun to fight. Shooting brutes and watching their armor shear off is immensely satisfying. There are no teleporting Prometheans or other irritants to sully the experience. On top of this, there are the boss encounters I've mentioned. None of them may make any top 10 boss lists of all time, but they're generally well designed and offer unique challenges from the ground troops. They spruce up the experience, and they serve as memorable capstones to missions, many of which would otherwise blend with each other. As you've probably gathered, I'm a pretty big fan of Infinite's combat. However, that isn't to say that things are perfect. The balance of the equipment feels a bit off. The grapple shot really does feel like the favorite child, and after a few upgrades, there often feels like little reason to use other equipment over it. As I said, there is an upgrade that significantly reduces the recharge rate, meaning that the grapple shot can often get back online before you even land from your prior use. Why use a drop wall and hunker down, when you can just grapple to a safer vantage point? Why use thrust when grappling takes you much further, much faster? Thrust in particular feels useless. You'd think it would serve better as a quick reaction tool, but the fact that you have to swap to activate the equipment before actually thrusting makes it too clunky. I preferred the dedicated button that Halo 5 gave to thrust, but I understand thrust inclusion as equipment so that thrust wouldn't be a core part of the Spartan kit in multiplayer. Because of this, thrust is relegated to a few niche cases, such as when fighting hunters, where you want to dodge yet remain close to their backs. I do wonder if Infinite's sandbox would have been better served by increasing the cooldown on grapple shot, so that the sandbox would be less dominated by it. However, this change may have discouraged other more niche uses of the grappling hook, like grappling weapons or fusion coils, so who knows. As great as the weapon sandbox is, I do have a few minor complaints. Although the weapons in the aggregate feel amazing, there are a few that feel meh. The Pulse Carbine lacks impact, and the Bulldog doesn't have the punch of a traditional pump shotgun. I feel like the sandbox is missing a true pump shotgun as well as a DMR. They did add a DMR to the multiplayer after all. All in all though, these are nitpicks. Though perhaps my biggest complaint with combat doesn't have anything to do with mechanics. Rather, the bland level design hampers combat. Although the weapons are great and the enemies are varied, fighting them in copy-paste Forerunner corridors still induces a sense of fatigue. Varied levels bolster the variety that enemy types provide. Snipers are a long-range threat, but they're an even bigger threat if they have dedicated perches to shoot from. Berserkers are more intimidating in claustrophobic corridors. These are just a few examples of how altering level design can make enemy distinctions, and therefore combat encounters, more diverse and engaging. Infinite's arena design doesn't offer any diversity to fights. One of the game's final missions serves as an excellent counterexample, so I'll wait to talk a bit more about this when we reach it. Although I have complaints, I can't stress enough just how good Halo Infinite feels to play. To me at least, it's the best feeling Halo game to date. Combat is the aspect of Halo Infinite that 343 Industries really nailed. It feels like the proper evolution of 3 games worth of iteration, and where the game reaches its potential. Another lauded part of Infinite is its art direction. However, to me, the art direction changes feel more like a reversion to what people already like rather than innovation. Combat, in contrast, really comes into its own, offering an experience that respects the past while also stepping forward. The combat design had a clear vision that was executed upon well. There is a moment in particular that stood out to me. I rode to Mission Point with a Marine, where we encountered 2 hunters guarding a lift. The Marine decided bravely, but also stupidly, to charge the hunters and fight them 2v1. He, of course, didn't survive, but his noble sacrifice provided a great distraction. Because the hunters were focused on him, I could shoot at their exposed backs with a skewer. It was a funny, memorable moment that came about organically, and it really highlighted the power of Infinite's combat and open world sandbox. On that note, I think Chief is just about done visiting those data beacons. Let's pick up where the story left off. With this sequence, the weapon is able to unlock the command spire, granting Chief access to the Nexus. As I mentioned, this is the point of no return in the campaign, so it's story missions from here on out. When they reach the center of the Nexus, the weapon admires the craftsmanship of everything, but Chief quickly shuts her down.
So much potential. It's exquisite.
It's dangerous.
Of course, I'm not suggesting we change the plan, but you can see it, right?
All I see is a problem.
What will it take for you to trust me?
Here, we see the continued battle within Chief. In one moment, he's asking if the weapon is okay, and in another, he's closed off and distrustful. His heart, I think, is drawn towards connecting with the weapon, but the scars from Cortana run deep, memories of which he's reminded of constantly through this section, as he hears audio fragments from his past from Cortana and even Captain Keyes. This culminates with a hologram of Chief's final moments with Cortana in Halo 4, one of the most emotional moments in the series. Chief's voice even breaks a little when he recalls it. While this is a walk down memory lane for the Chief, it also serves the same purpose for the player. The game hopes to spark your own memories with Cortana, and thus rekindle your own care for her. This is priming you for upcoming events in the story. The stirring of these memories, I believe, are what caused Chief's following decision. The Harbinger appears and attempts to hack the weapon. Chief, in turn, activates her deletion protocol. After being forced to encounter so many memories of Cortana, I think the last thing Chief can bear is to see another AI companion be corrupted, so he opts to delete her. The weapon manages to ward off the Harbinger, and she also deactivates the protocol. She's very hurt that Chief tried to delete her, and she sees it as a big betrayal. This reaction feels a bit like manufactured melodrama to me. If you recall, her original purpose was to be deleted, and she was confused at why Chief didn't do so. Now she's super upset when he actually tries to go through with it. I understand that there are justifications you could make. First off, it can be seen as character development that she now wants to live, rather than just being a tool destined for destruction. But when they reach the top of the control tower and shut off all the spires, she confronts the Chief about it.
Explain this to me. I waited 6 months. I've done everything you've asked. I was supposed to be deleted. You're the reason I'm still here. You. All of this, you could not have done it without me. None of it. I trusted you. Why can't you do the same?
You don't understand.
Try me.
Cortana.
He's gone. Dead. All that's left are echoes, and sooner or later they'll be gone too.
Will they?
Are you two alive?
Her argument here is muddled. She says she was supposed to be deleted, and that she did everything he asked. Although she acknowledges her purpose is to be deleted, she never refutes it. She doesn't argue that she shouldn't be deleted, or even that she doesn't want to be deleted. Her words indicate that she's angry at Chief, purely on the basis that he doesn't trust her. If so, her argument is self-defeating. She says she did everything he asked, but she just disobeyed him by reverting the deletion protocol. I mean, if anything, that should make the Chief trust her less. To make it worse, the pilot even acts horrified that Chief tried to delete her, behaving like the three of them are old high school chums rather than people that met hours ago. Why exactly would he be aghast that the chief acted exactly according to protocol? That's why this whole thing feels a bit contrived to me. It feels like the writers wanted drama between the trio, so they backfilled justification rather than having it feel organic. The pilot arrives to pick them up. The weapon once again disobeys Chief and plans on staying at the command tower, but plans quickly change when Jaga ambushes and kidnaps the pilot. This feels like the shot in the arm that the story needed. For the past few hours, the plot has been really plodding along. There's a vague threat that the Banished will rebuild the ring and pose a danger, but the story doesn't generate a great sense of urgency around this. There isn't a fixed timescale, so it all feels a bit nebulous. But now we have an objective with clear consequences. They need to rescue the pilot, pronto. The weapon opens a portal for Chief. When traveling through it, he sees another vision of Cortana. Instead of a good memory though, this is a bad one. We see Cortana as the galactic level threat she became in Halo 5, using the Guardians to threaten entire planets. It's another reason of why Chief's distrust exists. They find a message left to them by Escharum. The pilot is alive, and Escharum yet again taunts Chief and prepares them for their legendary battle. At this point in the game, Escherum's speeches have grown incredibly old. When the protagonist and villain have what feels like the same conversation in the same manner over and over, it stops being engaging and becomes trite. Escharum feels like more of a broken record than a threat. Chief and the weapon uncover a massive Banished structure, which they judge is where Escharum is holed up and which is the source of their nefarious plans for the ring. Along the way, they come across another Cortana memory remnant where she is every bit the villain Halo 5 promised. She blows up a UNSC training facility with Spartans, and this helps the weapon realize just how far Cortana has fallen. Cortana's rampage continues when she reaches Earth and demands an unconditional surrender from Lord Hood. Chief recalls the following events himself.
We had to hide, regroup, come up with a plan.
To stop her?
To survive.
If Chief is talking in such dire terms, well, then we can only imagine how bad it truly was. The walkthrough of Cortana's atrocities ends with her most depraved. When Atriox refused to surrender, she destroyed their entire planet. I just want to emphasize just how bad Cortana's actions have been. She has committed supervillain level atrocities here. She's murdered UNSC troops, entire countries, entire planets. This, at least to me, evaporated any sense of sympathy I might have had for her. After the weapon finally grasps the full magnitude of their original mission, she receives a bombshell.
I'm her?
Yes. An exact copy.
Although this is a huge revelation to the weapon, I don't think it's much of one to the player. I mean, she looks like Cortana and sounds exactly like Cortana. The game isn't exactly hiding the 8-ball from us. But that's okay, this moment is meant to be a surprise to her, not to us. The weapon finally understands Chief's distrust, and she requests to be deleted so she doesn't become like Cortana. Chief, though, isn't ready to let her go.
How can you trust me?
I don't. But I want to.
I really like this moment. It shows that Chief is a true guardian despite his lapse earlier. He's loyal to those under his protection, and he's willing to keep them safe despite the risks. I also think at a deeper level that he does miss Cortana, and the weapon is another shot at simply having a friend. Halo 4 made it very clear how much of a loner he is. They race to the Banished structure, an Infinite's obligatory vehicle level. It's decent enough, and I like how many vehicles there are to choose from. Within the facility, they find another hologram of Escharum, who dubs this place the House of Reckoning. I've already made my point on these overdrawn hologram speeches, so I'm just going to continue on. Chief goes deeper into the house, where a combat trial awaits in a Banished training facility. This is the best combat segment in the whole game. The arena is bigger than others in the game, giving you and your enemies space to breathe, yet it's still more confined than the open world, which gives this space energy and structure. The various structures and platforms give Chief and his enemies so much room to maneuver in, and this entire segment feels both free and dynamic. Earlier, I spoke about how Halo Infinite's repetitive arenas hampered the combat design by making fights feel samey. This area is the counterexample I mentioned. This arena makes the combat not only feel different, but even better than anywhere else in the game. It really makes me wonder how Halo Infinite's combat could have flourished in a more linear game, with more curated combat arenas like this. Chief finally encounters Jaga, and his introduction is suitably ominous and intimidating. Unfortunately for how cool this guy looks, His boss fight feels pretty similar to Chalk Lux. He's an elite with an energy sword and cloaking. It's still a decent fight, but the lead up to Jaga felt like he deserved something more unique. After he's down for the count, Eshram himself awaits. For how much the guy hyped up this fight, you expect the game to deliver something truly memorable. I certainly wouldn't classify this fight as legendary, but I think it's pretty good. Eshram has a unique mechanic where he has a shield that must be disabled by shooting fuses in the walls. He starts with a scrap cannon, but he swaps to a unique hammer once things get dicey. I'd say it's a good fight, but nothing that will blow your socks off. When he dies, Chief pays him respect, which the pilot is appalled by. This is a good moment, and it's in line with Chief's character, especially after what we've just learned about the Banished. Cortana nuking their planet undoubtedly pushed them to extreme measures. I think they deserve at least a crumb of sympathy. Besides, both Eshram and the Chief are warriors. In another universe, I could see him and Chief being friends. The Banished aren't the only threat on this planet. The Harbinger still needs to be dealt with. Chief and his allies head to the Silent Auditorium to stop her. On the journey through the auditorium, more memory fragments finally reveal what happened to Cortana. When the weapon locked Cortana down, Atriox took advantage of the situation and captured her.
I've been waiting for you to show up. What's the plan? Take me back to the Infinity for deletion? Halsey's gonna love that.
I want to point out that up until this moment, Cortana is entirely unrepentant, even acting smug and arrogant. Upon realizing that Atriox intends on weaponizing the ring, Cortana abruptly realizes the error of her ways. She calls herself a stupid idiot and she resolves to make things right.
How could I have been so stupid? He has the ring. A weapon pointed into the universe. Nothing left to lose. My fault. My stupid fault.
Cortana destroys the ring, and in the process sacrifices herself to delay Atriox. Meanwhile, she prevents the weapon's deletion, knowing that the Chief will need her. So there we go. The mystery of Zeta Halo's destruction finally unraveled. It's delivered in an underwhelming way via these memory fragments. My bigger issue though is by far Cortana's characterization here. She goes from a planet destroyer so confident in her mission that she's arrogant, and she spins on a dime. All of a sudden she's repentant, realizing the error of her ways just because Atriox took control of the ring. It's some of the most forced character development I've seen in a while. It's far too quick and jarring to be believable. On top of that, we just went through montages of Cortana massacring people and blowing up planets. Any sympathy I had for her had been well and truly evaporated. It would have taken a Herculean effort to get me to sympathize with her, and this is just about the farthest thing from that. Halo Infinite's revelations, especially around Cortana, just leave me feeling cold. The Harbinger still remains. She has managed to find her Endless, which, by the way, we still know next to nothing about. The threat she presents is vague, and the consequences of her success are unclear. As a result, the game doesn't offer a compelling motivation to stop her. The boss fight is okay. She teleports around, which is a little annoying, but overall it's not a bad fight. The Harbinger in her death says that the Endless will still return, but without knowing what they are, her declaration feels empty. Speaking of empty, Cortana has left Chief with a final recording, which she created in the milliseconds before her death. This is the second final moment we've had between Chief and Cortana in the span of 3 games. Halo 4's ending packed an emotional punch, but this moment completely misses for me. It's supposed to be another emotional moment, a second final goodbye, but because of what I talked about earlier about Cortana, I have no sympathy for her. This woman destroyed entire planets, and I'm supposed to feel bad about her passing? Her transformation back to a good guy is just complete whiplash. Even worse is that this is merely a recording. Chief isn't actually interacting with Cortana here. Halo's second most important character died off screen, which, when you think about it, is a pretty mind-blowing decision. I think I made my point though, so I won't harp on it any longer. The trio reunites. The pilot finally introduces himself with his real name, Fernando Esparza. The weapon needs a name as well, and Chief lets her choose it.
You get to choose your name.
Then I think I might have the perfect one.
All right, here we go.
This cutscene is so awkward. The weapon announces that she's chosen her name, but neither the Chief nor the pilot ask her what it is. If I was the weapon, my feelings would be pretty hurt. Her name, though, is intended to be a secret revealed later. The game's final cutscene reveals that Atriox is indeed alive, and he seems to have awoken the mysterious Endless. Whatever threat they pose will have to wait for another title. The beginning of the campaign built up a confrontation with Atriox, but that is left on the table. And with that, Halo Infinite ends. It's an abrupt, fairly anticlimactic ending that I'm not a huge fan of. But let's take a step back and reflect on the story and game as a whole. As I talked about at the start, Halo Infinite chose a difficult road by being both a sequel to Halo 5 and also a semi-reboot. It tries to tie up Halo 5's loose ends while also creating a clean slate. So let's examine how Halo Infinite did at both objectives. Halo Infinite does a pretty poor job serving as a sequel to Halo 5. Some might argue that Halo 5's story was unsalvageable, but that's neither here nor there, because Infinite tried to anyway. However, it's clear that this attempt was half-hearted. Cortana is pushed into the background until the very end of the game, where they try to wrap up her story way too quickly. The result feels contrived, as the story attempts to revert Cortana back to her old self in her final moments that feels unearned. Halo Infinite constructs its story as a mystery, but because these final revelations about Cortana land so flat, the mystery aspect also feels underwhelming. What about the other half of the coin? How does Halo Infinite's story serve as a reboot for the series? Well, I think it does a slightly better job. The Banished are a compelling faction, so the focus on them instead of the Prometheans work. Their motivations are compelling, and even though Escharum yaps too much, I overall liked his character. The pilot and the weapon are mixed bags. The pilot is nearly unbearable at the beginning, but after his personal moment with the Chief, he becomes more likable. The weapon has some inconsistent and annoying moments, but she too is overall likable. She's just different enough from Cortana to feel like a new character. Her innocence is refreshing. What really matters though is that there are a handful of moments throughout the campaign centered around each of these characters that does land, and that's enough to build sympathy for them. By the end of the campaign, I did look forward to seeing where the story would take the pilot and the weapon, which I consider an overall win. Furthermore, although the Endless should have received more attention in the story, Atriox's plans with them are intriguing. I do want to find out what happens next. I guess overall, you can really feel these priorities conflict throughout the story. I can't help but feel that Halo Infinite would have been better served by just committing one way or the other. Either finish Halo 5's story, or throw it out entirely. Either really spend time fleshing out Cortana's ending, or flesh out the likes of Atriox, the Endless, and so on. The half-foot in, half-foot out approach just doesn't work for me. I think the toughest part to overcome with Halo Infinite's campaign is just this overarching sense of fatigue. This is the third game in the 343 series, yet this game in many ways feels like the first installment in the series. New characters, new factions, and new cliffhangers. Every game in the trilogy has felt like its own isolated, rebooted game, and I would just like to see some continuation. It's hard feeling like you're starting over again and again. Halo Infinite's ending promised that, but worst of all, it seems like all these plot threads are going to be abandoned yet again. The game offered no story DLC, and 4 years later, there is no sequel to Halo Infinite in sight. The rebranded Halo Studios is now working on a CE remake and Halo 2 and 3 remakes if rumors are to be believed. It seems like many more years before Halo Infinite's story is continued. I have doubts that it ever will be either. The weapon's name, teed up for the next title, was instead revealed out of game by Halo Studios in 2025. Her name is Joyeuse if you were curious. With the prospect of Infinite being another narrative dead end, it only makes the fatigue worse. I don't want to end this perspective on such an overwhelmingly negative note, so I want to put everything into perspective. Halo Infinite is a good game in many ways, fantastic even. The combat is an undisputed triumph. 343 Industries finally found the perfect balance between modern shooter innovations and the classic feel of Halo. The art style pays tribute to the past as well, while also looking excellent in the modern era. In many ways, it is truly a dream come true to explore a Halo ring more freely than any other title to date. The ring holds sight to many beauties, and the combat holds up so well that the ring's standard activities are still an absolute blast. In fleeting moments, the game accomplishes the dream laid out when we first stepped out of the escape pod all of those years ago. The story does have some excellent character moments, such as between the Chief and the pilot, or the Chief and the weapon. The Banished are a great faction that serve as excellent antagonists for the story. Despite all these positives, the entire game just doesn't come together as a cohesive whole. The game battles with its identity as a reboot and a sequel, and this lack of vision pervades the story. We're left with a game that, yet again, feels like 2 steps forward and 1 or 2 steps back. Halo Infinite has all the ingredients of a fantastic game, The final dish, though, doesn't come out tasting quite right. Finally, we've made it through the 3 campaigns of the 343 era. At the beginning of the retrospective, I said that the trilogy is plagued by a single core issue. Did you notice it? I touched on the issue a bit in my conclusion to Infinite, but I want to put a fine point on it. There are a lot of good things throughout the 343 era. The emotional connection and character building in Halo 4, the expanded scope and universe of Halo 5, the gameplay of Infinite. However, these good aspects are marred by a lack of vision. The games lack a sense of iteration and improvement. Halo 4 created a sound emotional core. Instead of building upon this core with Master Chief, Halo 5 entirely pushes the character aside. Guardians ended on a cliffhanger with Cortana. Infinite, though, isn't willing to fully commit to the story, nor abandon it, leaving the game in a weird limbo. The art direction goes this way and that, and so does the gameplay. Halo 5 doesn't feel like a sequel to 4. Infinite, likewise, doesn't feel like a sequel to Guardians. There isn't cohesion between games, but there isn't cohesion within titles either. Within each game, you can sense this tug of war between ideas that wasn't resolved by the game's publication. I already spoke about Infinite's indecision with the story, which is both an inter- and intra-game issue. However, this pattern persists with the other games. Halo 4 has this emotional tale with Chief and Cortana, but it saddles this plot with a bland main plot that the storytellers almost seem bored and disinterested in telling. Why wasn't the heart of the story the main focus, and given time to be even further fleshed out? Halo 5 continues the story of Chief and Cortana in brief stints, but the runtime is crowded by Team Osiris. Neither team is given enough time to be fleshed out and thrive. A vision is so vital to a game. Without a keen sense of direction, your ship is left adrift in the ocean, not progressing to any destination, bound to eventually crash and burn. Unfortunately, that's exactly what happened to the franchise. There is a lot to appreciate about the 343 era, and I hope the good qualities of these games came across. I think they're worth appreciating and acknowledging. However, it's simply hard to ignore how these games pale in comparison to their predecessors due to this lack of vision. Like or dislike Halo 3 ODST, but it's clear that that game had a very clear vision of what it wanted to be and the experience it wanted to convey. Hopefully this new upcoming era of Halo sees the studio firmly grasp the wheel and steer the ship in a clear direction. With a defined vision, I think, this series still has the potential to reach great heights again. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment. On smaller channels like mine, this engagement really helps push the video out to new people. Besides, I always enjoy hearing your own thoughts on the games. Either way, it means a lot that you made it all the way through this long retrospective. Have a great rest of your day. Until next time.